Chapter 1. Solitary smoke rose in the great desert, and the round sun set over the long river. The boundless desert was vast and high, vast and majestic. When the red sun set in the west, the horizon was dark red, and there was a sense of desolation amidst the majesty. The smoke of war had long since faded away. Although the ancient Yellow River Road had changed several times, it was still there. Chu Feng was traveling alone and very tired. He lay on the yellow sand and looked at the bloody sunset. He did not know how long it would take to leave this desert. He had graduated a few days ago and said goodbye to the goddess of the university. Perhaps he would never see her again. After all, he had been tactfully told that they would be separated from each other and that it was time to break up. After leaving the university, he came out to travel. The setting sun was very red and hung at the end of the desert. There was a kind of tranquil beauty in the emptiness. Chu Feng sat up and drank some water. He felt that his energy had recovered quite a bit. His body belonged to the slender and strong type. His physique was very good, and his fatigue gradually faded. He stood up and looked into the distance. He felt that he was about to leave the desert. After a while, he might see the tents of the herdsmen. He decided to continue forward. He headed westward, leaving a very long and distant trail of footprints in the desert. There was no sound, but there was actually fog. This was very rare in the desert. Chu Feng was surprised. The fog was actually blue and gave people a kind of chill in this late autumn season. Unknowingly, the fog gradually thickened and the hazy blue color enveloped the entire desert. At the end of the desert, the setting sun seemed somewhat strange. It gradually turned into a blue sun with a kind of demonic beauty. The fiery clouds were also dyed blue. Chu Feng frowned. Although he knew that the desert weather was the most changeable, the scene before him was really not normal. Everything was quiet. He stopped in his tracks. Before entering the desert, he had heard from the local herdsmen that one would sometimes hear strange sounds and see strange things while walking in the desert, so he had to be extra careful. At that time, he did not pay much attention. It was still quiet. Apart from the hazy blue fog in the desert, there were no other changes. Chu Feng quickened his pace. He wanted to leave as soon as possible. At the end of the desert, the setting sun was a strange blue, dyeing the western sky blue. However, it was about to disappear into the horizon. Chu Feng began to run faster and faster. He did not want to stay in such a strange and uncertain place. In the desert, mirages often happened under the scorching sun. It didn't seem like a mirage at all. Suddenly, a light sound came from the front, as if something was breaking through the sand. Moreover, the sound was very concentrated, rising and falling. Chu Feng suddenly stopped and stared at the desert. The ground in front of him was dotted with blue stars, like scattered blue diamonds, sparkling and translucent, shining in the afterglow of the setting sun. Those were tender saplings that were less than an inch tall. They broke out from the desert's earth, carrying beautiful luster, translucent and bewitching. They could be found everywhere. After a momentary pause, rustling sounds filled the air. Brilliant blue light shone as all of the tender sprouts quickly grew taller. On the horizon, the blue sun was sinking, about to disappear. Mist filled the air, and the vast desert seemed to be covered with a strange blue veil. Pop! The sound of flowers blooming rang out. The desert was a deep blue. The moment the setting sun was about to disappear, these plants began to blossom into large patches of flowers. Large amounts of blue flowers were sparkling and translucent like a dream. They were somewhat intoxicating as they bloomed all over the desert. It was extremely unreal. This plant was more than a foot tall, and its entire body was as translucent as blue coral. Its petals were beautiful and enchanting, as if it was blooming in a different country. It carried a demonic nature that attracted one's attention. Chu Feng took a step back, but behind him was also full of this plant. The blue light flowed, and he couldn't see the end of it at a glance. He was shocked and looked carefully, trying his best to identify it. It was extremely similar to the red spider lily, its petals unfolding and curving backwards. It was extremely beautiful. However, the red spider lily was bright red, and this plant was blue. He had never heard of a blue spider lily before. The spider lily really existed, and it carried a strong religious overtone. There were too many legends about it, but Chu Feng didn't believe in them. He was only shocked by the scene in front of him. The desert was dry and lacked water. Only a few drought-resistant plants could be seen scattered here and there. And the spider lily liked gloomy and damp environments. No matter what, it shouldn't have appeared here, and it was so beautiful. It was everywhere here, and he couldn't see the end of it. The vast desert was dyed blue by the thin mist that soaked the horizon. Meanwhile, the entire vast and boundless desert was filled with blue spider lilies. It was indescribably strange and mysterious. A wisp of faint fragrance wafted through the air, captivating one. Chu Feng shook his head and carefully walked forward, avoiding these flowers. He discovered that there was only one area without this plant, and that was the ancient Yellow River path. It had changed many times over the years, and its path had changed several times. It ran through this desert, and now it was almost dried up. The blue spider lilies bloomed on both sides, surrounding it. The flowers bloomed on both sides, and they could see each other from afar. Finally, the sun set, and it was also at this time that these plants bloomed. The flowers bloomed to the extreme, turning into a blue ocean that overflowed with brilliant colors. Although dusk had fallen, the blue luster lingered here. It was extremely dazzling and extraordinarily beautiful. Chu Feng stood on the ancient Yellow River path. He couldn't calm down, but he didn't stop and quickly advanced along the river. The sky gradually darkened, and the last afterglow of the setting sun also disappeared. The blue desert was dotted with specks of light, and then suddenly, with a bang, all the blue spider lilies withered at the same time after blooming. The beautiful petals withered, and then the entire plant began to dry up. They lost their color, and their vitality was exhausted. They quickly turned yellow and then shattered, as if they had lost decades of life in an instant. Bang! At the last moment, the withered blue spider lilies all over the ground broke apart inch by inch, turning into powder. This strange scene was difficult to explain. They were like fireworks, dazzling and beautiful to the extreme. Then, they withered and turned into ashes. The withered yellow powder fell on the sand, difficult to distinguish in the twilight. At this time, the blue mist had long since disappeared, and the desert returned to its original state. It was as if nothing had happened, and everything was peaceful again. Chu Feng didn't stop and strode forward. In the twilight, he climbed over many sand dunes and finally saw the shadow of the mountains on the horizon. He was about to leave the desert. The sky gradually darkened, and he finally walked out. He could clearly see the mountains, and vaguely see the tents of the herdsmen at the foot of the mountain. When he turned back, the vast desert behind him was very quiet, no different from any other day. In front of the mountains, lights flickered. When he was still far from the foot of the mountain, he heard some noise. It wasn't calm there, as if something was happening. In addition, there were the frightened cries of cattle and sheep, as well as the muffled growls of Tibetan mastiffs. Chapter 2. The cattle and sheep seemed to be frightened and almost broke through the fence. The herdsmen tried to stop them and scolded them loudly. The fierce Tibetan mastiffs were now lying low on the ground, growling anxiously. At the same time, there were children crying and women comforting them. A few old herdsmen were praying piously. In the end, they even knelt down and kowtowed to the tall mountains in a solemn manner. The herdsmen weren't surprised by Chu Feng's arrival because outsiders often passed by and stayed in the herdsmen's tents. After a long time, the noise at the foot of the mountain finally died down. Chu Feng used hot water to wash his body and drank the fragrant butter tea. His exhaustion immediately subsided, and he gave all the candies he had to the children. The children's faces were flushed red from the highlands. They wore bashful smiles and looked very simple. After distributing the candies, they all left happily and contentedly. Chu Feng wondered what had happened to this mountain not long ago. Could it be that the demonic blue spider lilies had bloomed here? The old herdsman in the tent had white hair and deep wrinkles on his face. He looked very worried as he gazed out of the tent and at the mountains in the distance. Soon, Chu Feng learned that the blue mist had indeed appeared here. It lingered in the mountains and startled many animals. They became very violent and wanted to escape. However, there were no strange blue spider lilies, and the mist was very thin. "Why are you kowtowing to the mountains?" Chu Feng asked. "That's the direction of the sacred mountain," the old herdsman replied. Kunlun was known as the divine mountain and the sacred mountain. It was the most mythical place. From the classic of mountains and seas to Huainanzi and historical records, there were many ancient records about it. Before this, there was only a thin layer of blue mist around the mountains. However, some people saw that the blue mist in the direction of the Kunlun mountain range was abnormally dense. The mist there was surging, translucent, and dense. Later on, it became like a beam of light, overflowing with blue light and blazing multicolored light. It was very intense. It was as if a dazzling blue sun was wrapped in the thick mist and floated there. Although it was very far away, it would shoot out rays of light from time to time like lightning. From afar, it was incomparably mysterious. The resplendent blue light danced in the air and was extremely dazzling. Therefore, some elderly herdsmen kowtowed in that direction and prayed devoutly. It was clear that the scene there was extremely astonishing. The blue mist was so dense that it wouldn't disperse, and it carried blazing multicolored light. It was even more intense than what Chu Feng had seen in the desert. What was the cause of these miraculous scenes? Chu Feng pondered. He thought of a possibility. Perhaps it was caused by an earthquake in the mountains. In the past, there was a place where something similar had happened. That valley would often erupt with lightning, bombarding living creatures. If there was a violent earthquake in the mountains, it might cause the abnormal value of the magnetic field to be extremely high. Under the effect of the electromagnetic field, the electric charge in the clouds and the magnetic field in the mountains would interact, causing the electric charge to discharge. Coupled with the aurora effect, it would cause the area to be colorful and become a very special minefield. Chu Feng was not superstitious. He felt that most of what happened in the mountains was just a natural phenomenon. However, no matter how he explained, the old herdsman didn't believe him. He glared at him angrily, believing that he was blaspheming the sacred mountain. He almost drove him away. In fact, there were indeed some inexplicable and far-fetched things. Even Chu Feng himself hadn't completely understood them. For example, the beautiful flower in the desert not long ago. He sighed. In this post-civilization era, there were many things that were unexplainable. Although people tried their best to explain them with the laws of the past, the world was becoming more and more difficult to understand. The war had once destroyed half of the earth and almost turned it into a wasteland. Although the earth was full of vitality after a long period of recovery, it was difficult to restore the glorious era of the past. In the long years of the post-civilization era, there had been several mysterious changes that had a great impact, but they were still unexplainable. Early in the morning, the bright red sun leaped over the horizon. The brilliant morning glow glided over the hills and landed in front of the tent. The grassland was full of vitality. Chu Feng bid farewell to the tribe and set off again. He went all the way west and entered the plateau. Along the way, he learned that the mysterious blue mist covered an extremely wide area. At the very least, it had appeared in the areas he had passed. Could it be another mysterious change? He muttered to himself. Those few times in history had caused great disturbances. Even now, there was no definite answer. The sky in the Tibetan area was exceptionally blue and the clouds were pure white. They were very low to the ground, as if one could touch them by stretching out one's hand. the desert, the mountains, and the grassland were all very quiet. It was like a pure land that stood aloof from worldly affairs. Along the way, Chu Feng heard a lot of rumors. Some herdsmen said that the living Buddha on the sacred mountain had awakened. That was why the blue light flowed and the mist filled the air. Others said that the Vajra Bodhi tree was growing and was about to bear fruit. The dragon mastiff is about to be born. Others said. In the eyes of the locals, the real mastiff was born in the wild and could rival lions and tigers. The mastiff that was raised by humans was not a real mastiff. There was also a legend that the dragon mastiff lived in the sacred mountain. One would appear every few hundred years. It was extremely powerful and could subdue demons. Several days later, Chu Feng approached the sacred mountain area. He had already learned that along the way, a faint blue mist had appeared everywhere. It was most likely another major change, just like the previous times in history. At the same time, this also meant that, just like the previous times, ordinary people would never understand the internal cause. In fact, most people didn't even know what the consequences would be. Strangely enough, it was already late autumn and the weather in Tibet should be very cold. But in recent days, as Chu Feng traveled westward, he gradually felt a sense of warmth. A few days ago, the yellow leaves had withered and the ground was covered with withered leaves. But now it was different. The remaining leaves on the trees seemed to have regained their vitality. They were no longer withered and falling. Especially as he approached Mount Kunlun. Along the way, whether it was weeds or brambles, they were all green and full of vitality in the warm weather. It was already late autumn, but it lacked that kind of desolation. The weather is getting warmer. Could it be caused by the change? Chu Feng guessed. Finally, Mount Kunlun was in sight. Even from a distance, he could feel a sense of oppression. The lofty mountain range was majestic and majestic. It was continuous and magnificent, like the backbone of the world stretching across the land. It was majestic and vigorous, incomparable. None of the great mountains of ancient times could compare to it. This mountain range bore the weight of countless legends. Since ancient times, it had been shrouded in an extremely dense mythological color. Originally, after entering Tibet, Chu Feng was about to embark on his return journey. However, along the way, he kept hearing of strange movements in Mount Kunlun. He wanted to go closer to take a look. It's here. Chu Feng arrived at his destination. Standing at the foot of the mountain, the towering mountain was like a giant city of the gods. It was vast and vast, sitting on the western land. A boundless and vigorous aura assaulted his face. This was only a small section of Mount Kunlun. On that evening a few days ago, this area was once filled with blazing blue light. Everyone nearby had seen it, but these days very few people actually dared to go near. Chu Feng entered the mountain and gradually climbed. The mountain gradually became higher and steeper. Giant rocks lay in disarray. The road became more and more difficult to walk. Along the way, the vegetation was lush, which was obviously not normal in this late autumn. Was there really an earthquake a few days ago? Chu Feng observed. There were traces of cracks on the mountain, and there were many thick cracks on the ground. There were also giant rocks that had obviously rolled down from the higher parts of the mountain. Some of the cliffs were even broken. This was the giant mountain where an unusual phenomenon had occurred. What is this? Chu Feng saw a giant rock with deeply carved words on it. Most of the words were buried in the soil and rock. After the earthquake, a small part of the mountain broke off and landslide occurred. This giant rock was revealed from the depths of the earth. There was a layer of green on the rock, like dried moss. West, Queen. Chu Feng touched the carved words on the rock and recognized the two words. It was a golden script, a very ancient script. In ancient times, it was often carved on bells and cauldrons. It was difficult for ordinary people to recognize it. For a moment, Chu Feng was lost in thought. How could it be these two words? Seeing the two words, West Queen, here, how could he not think of it? Was there really a Queen Mother of West in ancient times? Perhaps it's just an inscription left by the ancient people who came here to pay homage. Chu Feng shook his head and explained himself. Something is wrong. Suddenly, he was stunned. When he touched the carved marks, he found that the so-called dried moss was not normal. Green copper rust. This discovery shocked him. This steel had been buried in the mountain for a long time. Thinking about it carefully, there should not be any moss on it. It had been through a very long period of time, and only saw the light of day after the earthquake. It was actually made of bronze. However, such a large piece of bronze was really rare. The Queen Mother Wu cauldron unearthed in the Yin ruins was less than 2,000 jin, but it was known as the largest ancient bronze artifact. But this bronze steel, Chu Feng pushed away some soil and rocks. Conservatively, this bronze was at least 5 or 6,000 jin. It was really shocking. In ancient times, this was definitely a rare and important artifact. It was covered with green rust. At first glance, it was an ancient artifact that had been buried for a long time. If it was a stone steel, Chu Feng would have thought that it was left by the ancient people who came here to pay homage. But now that it was such a large bronze steel, he was not sure. In ancient times, who could afford to spend just to pay homage? Long time no see ___ the new book of the Holy Ruins is being uploaded. Members click recommendation bookmark, please reach out. Chapter 3. Clang. The bronze tablet vibrated with the vicissitudes of time. Chu Feng put down the stone in his hand. He was sure that it was a bronze tablet, which he found hard to believe. An ancient bronze artifact weighing thousands of kilograms was no small matter. It would definitely cause a sensation if the news got out. The words, King of the West, were engraved on it, carrying the precipitation of time. It was simple yet mysterious, attracting people's attention. He really didn't know which era it was left behind. Who buried it in Mount Kunlun? Chu Feng knocked on the bronze tablet, and the metal vibrated continuously. Unfortunately, he was not an archaeologist and couldn't get any valuable conclusions. Perhaps there was an extremely glorious bronze civilization here many years ago, he said to himself and speculated. He had never been superstitious. Even though Kunlun was full of myths and legends, and he suddenly saw the bronze tablet with the words, King of the West, carved on it, he didn't really believe in those legends. Chu Feng felt that even if the Queen Mother of the West really existed, she might have been the leader of some ancient powerful tribe, and this place was just a relic. The violent earthquake caused the magnetic field of the mountain to be abnormal, and the clouds to discharge electricity. Coupled with the huge bronze exposed on the mountain, it attracted thunder and lightning. Chu Feng increasingly felt that this might be the reason. He wanted to dig out the bronze tablet and take a closer look, but it was buried halfway underground. Without tools, it would be difficult to succeed. After lingering here for a while, he climbed up again. The big crack on the mountain was very wide and deep, dark and shocking. It was a scene of ruin. There was no path along the way. The mountain was dangerous and steep, and there were huge rocks everywhere. The higher he went, the more difficult it was to walk. The mountain was huge. Walking alone on it, he felt its majesty and thought of the many legends about it. Chu Feng felt a little strange. He looked into the distance and saw the huge mountain connected to the sky. It was a very magnificent scene. He climbed for more than 1,000 meters on the mountain after the earthquake. It was not an easy journey. It was very dangerous when the rocks loosened and rolled down. In front of him, there was a large pile of rocks. The mountain wall had broken off not long ago. Chu Feng saw the anomaly from a distance away. Astonished, he quickly moved forward and climbed upwards. He wanted to confirm whether what he saw was real or not. It looks like verdigris. In the distance, he saw an expanse of green marks mottled with rust right by the cliff. This wasn't a small cluster, but rather a large expanse. Finally, when he got close, he could see it clearly. Seriously. This was even more shocking than the copper tablet they had seen earlier. After a large piece of the cliff on the mountain broke off, the place where it broke off and stuck to the precipitous part of the mountain revealed the truth that had been covered in dust. Leaning against the stone wall, green rust could be seen everywhere, ancient and mysterious. This was a copper building that appeared as part of the mountain slid down. There were 3 bronze houses, simple and unadorned, their backs leaning against the stone walls, built there. Some parts were buried by earth and stone, but most of them could still be seen. The style of the bronze house was ancient, and there was a sense of history in its grandeur. The tiles on the copper house were also made of bronze. Piece after piece, they were neat and orderly. At first glance, it looked like green scales were covering the house. Chu Feng was truly shocked, unable to calm down. This was a sensational discovery. Bronze artifacts were so enormous. These were but a few bronze houses, built on top of Kunlun Mountain, previously buried deep in the ground. What era were these things from? Who built them? According to his conjecture, there was definitely a resplendent bronze civilization in this area. It had existed for an extremely long time, and there were no records of it in the existing history books. However, at the same time, he was also uneasy and puzzled. The Queen Mother Wu cauldron was known as the largest ancient bronze artifact, but now it seemed that not only was it lighter than the copper tablet, but it couldn't even be considered a heavy artifact when compared to the houses in front of him. Without a doubt, the construction of this kind of house was even more difficult than casting a cauldron. The bronze houses were cast and cast together, exuding a sense of mystery in their grandeur and solemnity. If this was discovered by the outside world, it would definitely be regarded as a rare bronze artifact. In the past, such a huge artifact had never been seen. It was truly subversive. Chu Feng had always been calm in the face of trouble, but today, he couldn't remain calm. There was actually such a bronze relic in the mountains of the western region. It was truly shocking. He tried to push open a bronze door. With a slightly piercing sound of metal rubbing against each other, the bronze door was opened. Chu Feng didn't go in immediately. He stood outside for a while, and after some ventilation, he stepped in cautiously. It was very quiet inside, as if it was isolated from the outside world. One could hear a pin drop, but it was completely empty. There were no other artifacts on the ground or on the walls. The other 2 bronze houses were the same. The interior was spacious, without any tables or chairs. After careful inspection, there was nothing left behind. The bronze houses were empty. Chu Feng retreated and looked at the 3 bronze houses. There were too many puzzles in his heart. Were these buildings used by the ancients, or were they used for sacrificial ceremonies? In the distant ancient times, this was truly too extravagant. In the history books, it was recorded that the Queen Mother Wu cauldron of the Shang dynasty was forged with 200 to 300 craftsmen working closely together to complete it with great difficulty. In ancient times, if 3 bronze houses were to be forged, how difficult would it be? Chu Feng stopped here for a long time. In the end, he went up the mountain again. After a few hours, he was finally about to reach the peak. There was still about 200 meters left, and he was sweating profusely. His physique was excellent. His body was slender and strong, but it was still very tiring to climb such a huge mountain for such a long time. As he neared the peak, he gazed into the distance. The mountains rose and fell, and the land was magnificent. However, a person seemed incomparably small, like a speck of dust. Standing on the huge mountain, he raised his head and looked at the blue dome of the sky close at hand. It made one's heart feel comfortable, and one could forget all worries, personal honor, and everything else seemed insignificant. The altitude here was already very high, but there was no snow. Moreover, there was still vegetation, which made Chu Feng feel a little strange. There are traces of lightning strikes. Chu Feng found that there were scorch marks on the mountain. It had been struck by lightning before. There were large areas of vegetation that had been turned into ashes, and it was pitch black. In addition, the mountain rocks had been split open, and a large area of the mountain had been destroyed. This made him even more convinced that the thick fog and blue light that lingered here a few days ago was actually lightning. This place had been struck by lightning before. The road ahead was not easy to walk on. Huge rocks were piled up. Chu Feng took a detour and wanted to go up from the other side of the mountain. However, when he turned around and arrived at the other side of the mountain, his body slightly stiffened and his pupils contracted. This was the first time he had felt so shocked. Even when he saw the bronze houses, he was not like this. There had been landslides on this side of the mountain, and a thick layer of soil and rocks had rolled down, revealing a metallic texture. Bronze Mountain. After a large area of soil and rocks had been rolled down, the scene was too shocking. The area at the top of the mountain was made of bronze, and it had been buried under the soil. This was not a small area. It was about 200 meters away from the top of the mountain, and the entire area had revealed a bronze texture. How could he not have other thoughts? This mountain was made of bronze, and the surface was covered with soil and rocks, and the real scenery was underneath? How unimaginable! No one knew the truth, but at least this 200-meter-high mountain was made of bronze, which was enough to shock the world. Chu Feng was stunned. This was a mountain in Kunlun, and its interior was made of bronze. This had subverted his thoughts and tested his long-formed belief. He did not believe in those mysterious things, and had always listened to the so-called legends as stories. But now there was something strange about this place that could not be explained. After being struck by lightning, the truth of the bronze peak was revealed. What had happened here was indeed shocking. Chu Feng climbed up along the bronze mountain, and stopped when he was about 100 meters away from the top. This was because this place was abnormally steep, and it was a bronze precipice that was difficult to climb up. At the same time, he smelled a sweet fragrance that was carried by the wind. This place was made of copper, an ice-cold metal. There weren't any plants to be seen before, it was completely bare. Chu Feng looked up and searched carefully. Sure enough, there was a plant on the bronze cliff. That was already the area of the mountain peak. After he retreated, he tried to find another way to climb up from other directions. He gradually approached it, wanting to take a closer look. After a while, although he still could not reach the top of the mountain, he could see it clearly. It was a small green tree about 3 feet tall. It was rooted on the bronze cliff, and there was a flower that was about to bloom. Chu Feng was sure that his eyes were not playing tricks on him. There was no soil and rocks there, only bronze. It was rooted on the bronze cliff, which was really unimaginable. This was too shocking and incomprehensible. He changed his position and chose a better place to climb up. The distance was closer, and he could see clearly that the tree was indeed rooted on the bronze cliff. Chapter 4. At the peak of Mount Kunlun, on the highest cliff, a small tree grew by itself. It regarded bronze as soil and nourishment, tenaciously taking root. Its whole body was green and lustrous. The trunk was as thick as a wrist. Although it was not tall, its old bark was cracked like layers of scales, giving it a sense of vigor. Its leaves looked like they were carved from green jade, transparent and full of spirituality. They were shaped like the palm of a child, holding some crystal dewdrops. When the wind blew, it was like white pearls rolling on a jade plate. At the top of the small tree grew a flower bud the size of a fist. It was silvery white but had golden spots. It was waiting to bloom on the precipice, and its fragrance was already spreading. It was very beautiful. The demonic small tree stood proudly in silence. Chu Feng tried several times, but this side of the bronze mountain could not be climbed. He decided to take the risk and climb from the side full of rolling stones. However, he needed to be extra careful or he might lose his life. He retreated from the side of the bronze wall and came to a flat area. He walked around the mountain and looked up at the same time. How can it grow on bronze? Chu Feng did not understand. He could only attribute it to the fact that the world that had experienced several changes was becoming more and more incomprehensible. Chu Feng had calmed down. He frowned and thought about everything. The strange plants, the strange bronze mountain, all of this did not conform to common sense. A figure appeared in his mind because that person had said something. At that time, he did not pay attention, but now he was somewhat moved. One day, perhaps a weed on the roadside will bear a fist-sized bright red fruit, and the ordinary world we see will no longer exist. This was what Linoy said. It was very calm, as if she had said it casually. Just like when she broke up with Chu Feng, it was a little indifferent, and her voice was a little distant, as if she was standing on a very high place and saying those words. Chu Feng thought she was talking about the matter between the two of them. Whether it was life or feelings, nothing could not be changed. What did she mean? In this post-civilization era, the world had experienced several changes. Although most people did not know the inside story, there was always a small number of people who knew the truth. What did Linoy know? As her figure appeared in his mind, Chu Feng sighed. Although he was a little disappointed, let bygones be bygones. He raised his head again and looked at the peak of the bronze mountain with a strange expression. Did she really mean it? Following her train of thought, many ordinary things might change. Then what about the rare mutant trees that were already extraordinary? Such a small tree, even if it had not experienced the mutation, it must have been extraordinary. There were many rocks under his feet. Chu Feng had already walked to the edge of the bronze mountain. The road here was too difficult to walk. Suddenly, a gust of wind rushed over, and Chu Feng's eyelids twitched. He saw a shadow suddenly appear on the ground, and it was about to cover him. Something was approaching. His reflexes were quick and his body strong. With a flip of his body, he quickly dodged the attack. He quickly rolled a distance away on the mountain. In the process, he took out the self-defense folding crossbow and quickly assembled it. When traveling outdoors, especially when traveling alone, how could one not have some self-defense equipment? Chu Feng turned around and shot out a steel arrow. At the same time, he saw what it was. An indescribable expression of shock appeared on Chu Feng's face. This creature's body was too big, and it was far larger than its peers. It was a golden bird of prey. Its wings were very bright, and when stretched out, it was 5 to 6 meters long. It swooped down from the sky, and just now, it almost clawed him. With a clang, the steel arrow hit a large bluestone not far away. Sparks flew everywhere, and it brushed past the vicious bird. It actually dodged it. At the same time, its sharp claws scratched the soil on the ground, and the sound of friction was ear-piercing. It soared into the sky, and the wind whistled. Chu Feng felt a chill down his spine. If it was not for his fast reaction, the consequences would be unimaginable if he was caught by this vicious bird. A normal eagle could easily crack the skulls of wild rabbits and other prey. Such a large golden bird of prey, its strength could be imagined. Just now, if he was just a little bit slower, the scene would have been absolutely miserable. Chu Feng immediately retreated, chose a favorable terrain, and leaned his back against a boulder. Then, he held the folding crossbow in his hand, aimed at the sky, and cautiously prepared. In midair, the golden bird of prey circled. It was too fierce, and it stuck close to the mountain, stirring up a strong wind. He had never seen such a big bird. Looking at its appearance, it looked like a golden eagle. It had no mixed feathers, and its whole body was bright. Its body was frighteningly big, and it was very powerful. Its golden pupils were bright, and it was full of wildness. Its body carried a vicious aura. How could an ordinary golden eagle be so big? This one could be considered a different species. It was too abnormal. If it was in ancient times, some tribes might have regarded this golden bird of prey as a rock. Because, when the ancient people recorded it, it was often a little exaggerated. A 5 to 6 meter long golden bird was definitely an anomaly. If it appeared, it would definitely cause a huge wave. Especially in the Kunlun Mountains, it would add even more mysterious color. The golden giant bird was very fierce, but it did not immediately swoop over. Instead, it hovered. It had extraordinary acuity, and it was obviously aware of the power of the crossbow in Chu Feng's hand. Suddenly, Chu Feng smelled a fishy smell. 3 snow leopards came slowly and silently from below the mountain. Their pupils were faint, and their mouths were stained with blood. Their snow-white fangs were sharp, and it was obvious that they had hunted some creature not long ago. They stared at Chu Feng, and their bodies slightly arched. At the same time, they looked at the golden bird of prey in midair. They were very afraid and let out low roars of unease. The 3 snow leopards were far stronger than the average species. Their sharp claws were suffused with cold light, and their powerful bodies were ready to pounce at any time. Chu Feng frowned. He hadn't expected to encounter this kind of danger. There was a golden bird in the air, and there were leopards running extremely fast on the ground. His situation was worrying. Suddenly, the fur of the 3 snow leopards trembled, and the hair on their necks stood on end. They quickly dodged and jumped into the pile of rocks. Silently, a yak appeared on the mountain. Its entire body was glossy black, and its black fur was like silk, flowing with a black light. A pair of thick horns were raised towards the sky. This could be called a yak king. It was more than 3 meters long, and its 4 limbs were thick and solid. Its body was huge, and it stood there like a small black mountain. This made Chu Feng apprehensive. This black yak was so huge, but it walked as silently as the snow leopard. It also appeared suddenly, and he couldn't discover it in advance. Moreover, the 3 snow leopards were very afraid of this glossy black yak, and they hid in the rubble. This was very abnormal. The black yak raised its head to look at the golden bird in midair, and then it stopped moving. It stood there quietly and looked towards the top of the bronze mountain. How did these 3 creatures come here? Chu Feng knew that he was in a dangerous situation, so he didn't act blindly without thinking. He was waiting for an opportunity to leave. In the distance, 6 or 7 beast shadows were running towards the mountain. Their speed was extremely fast, and they bared their white fangs. Their ferocious nature could be seen clearly. There were 6 wolves, and they were all very tall and strong compared to their own kind. The alpha wolf in the lead was entirely snow-white, and it only had 1 eye. It emitted a faint green light, and it seemed the most ferocious. When they got close, they stopped for a short while. When they saw the black yak, they were a bit anxious, and when they saw the golden bird, they seemed to be uneasy. Suddenly, the tranquility was broken. The 6 vicious wolves exerted their strength together, and they rushed towards the top of the mountain along the rubble area. At the same time, the 3 snow leopards also moved. The mastiff was quiet, and its mouth was full of beast blood, but it was not its own. It was motionless, and it raised its head to look at the small tree on the bronze cliff. It was not very tall, but it looked especially powerful. Its earthy yellow mane was stained with the blood of other beasts, and it was awe-inspiring. During this process, the black yak had been staring at the small tree on the bronze mountain, and it did not move at all. It was actually very calm. And the golden bird was circling in the air, and just like before, it looked down at this place. The 3 strange creatures were very calm, as if they had intelligence. They were very calm, and their target was the small tree, but they did not move immediately, as if they were waiting for something. Chapter 5. The mountain top fell into silence. There was no sound. The 3 creatures didn't pay attention to Chu Feng, as if they had completely ignored him. Chu Feng understood that he was quite far from the mountaintop, and they probably didn't think he posed any threat. Thus, they didn't mind and let him stand below. These were 3 beyonder creatures with intelligence. I need to leave now. Chu Feng decided to descend the mountain. Although he was very curious about the little tree that had taken root on the bronze mountain, it was too dangerous for him to stay here. He could lose his life at any time. The fragrance became thicker as it came from the bronze mountain. The mastiff moved as fast as lightning. With a few leaps, it passed through the pile of rocks and rushed straight to the peak along the steep mountain. The Wenzhong long black yak had a shiny black body. The thick horns on its head were very intimidating. It moved its hooves and unhurriedly followed behind. Its steps were very steady. Along the side with rocks, it actually climbed up the steep bronze mountain. The vicious bird in the air seemed to be cast from gold. Its wings became more and more resplendent, and its eyes flashed with golden light. It lowered its altitude and approached the cliff, staring at the little tree. Just as Chu Feng was about to retreat, the fragrance became several times thicker. The flower bud was about to bloom. Pop! Although there was some distance between them, Chu Feng could clearly hear the sound of the flower blooming. At the top of the little tree, the fist-sized silver flower bud bloomed one petal. The flower bloomed with a sound. The fragrance was much thicker than before. It seemed to have a special magical nature that made people feel intoxicated. In a flash, the three creatures rushed to the edge of the cliff and nervously watched. Moreover, they began to fiercely sniff the flower's fragrance, as if they were swallowing it in large mouthfuls. Chu Feng turned around and just happened to see this scene. Their strange behavior made him very surprised. The three creatures couldn't bear it any longer. They wanted to attack each other, displaying their terrifying wild nature. A series of soft sounds could be heard. The silver petals kept on blooming, bringing with them a white mist and waves of sparkling light. The flower bloomed with a sound, and the fragrance was more than 10 times thicker. Chu Feng was truly apprehensive. What kind of flower was this? This kind of fragrance was too alluring. He couldn't help but want to turn around and rush towards the mountain top. At the top of the 3-foot-tall small tree, the fist-sized silver flower had completely bloomed. White mist spread out and pervaded the bronze cliff, making it look like a fairyland. There were golden spots on the petals, and at this moment they were shining together. In the white mist, the golden specks of light shone like stars, shining brilliantly. The scene was magnificent and enchanting. The three creatures had been waiting for this moment, waiting for it to mature. They fought over it, clashing fiercely, sharp claws moving through the air. This was the release of their primitive wildness. They were incomparably crazy, all of them wishing to monopolize that flower. When the jet-black yak stepped on the mountain, the entire mountain peak trembled. It was extremely powerful. Dang! In midair, the golden vicious bird opened its large claws and collided with the coarse horns, creating a deafening sound. The mastiff growled in a low voice that sounded like thunder. The three creatures were fighting and attacking each other, fighting over the blossoming flowers. During this process, they were also fiercely sniffing, desperately seizing the flower's fragrance. White mist curled up from the top of the bronze peak. Amidst the haze, the golden spot swayed, as if there was a small sea of stars shining in the mist. It was an extremely mysterious and beautiful place. Bang! They touched the lush green small tree, and one of the mastiff's large claws brushed against the flower. The wind surged as the golden vicious bird swooped down to meet the mastiff head-on. Its sharp claws fell down, wanting to tear the mastiff apart. Before, they didn't attack each other because they were afraid of each other. But now that the flower had bloomed, they didn't hesitate to risk their lives in order to fight over it. When the golden vicious bird flapped its wings, a few petals fell from the mastiff's large claws and floated down the bronze mountain along with the violent wind. This place was extremely steep, so the petals wrapped in white mist quickly fell towards Chu Feng. He raised his hand and caught one. The fragrance was so strong that it couldn't be dispersed, almost making him drunk. Upon closer inspection, there was a layer of sparkling and translucent inside the petals with golden spots. Pollen! There was a layer of pollen on the petals, flowing with luster. Chu Feng reached out his hand and caught the 4 petals one after another. 2 of them had a light fragrance because there was only a little pollen on them, while the other 2 were full of fragrance, densely covered with sparkling and translucent crystals. The fragrance was so strong that it couldn't be dispersed. The 3 creatures on the top of the bronze mountain all looked down with cold eyes, and then began to fight fiercely for the petals that hadn't fallen. Seeing this, Chu Feng grasped the petals tightly. However, he soon found something wrong. The petals in his hand were no longer warm, and there was a kind of withering feeling. He opened his palm and found that the translucent crystals on the 4 petals had disappeared, and the petals had also dried up. In an instant they lost their luster, lost their vitality, and became yellow and withered. What was going on? With a little force, one of the petals turned into dust. Chu Feng was shocked. He threw the remaining 3 withered petals down and shouted towards the top of the mountain, "I'll give them back to you." Then, he decisively turned around and rushed down the mountain, no longer paying attention to these things. Although he was in a hurry to escape, he couldn't help thinking along the way. Why did the 4 petals wither in an instant in his hand? This change was very strange. When he passed by the bronze house and bronze monument, he didn't stop. He just wanted to go down the mountain as soon as possible. The mountain terrain gradually became flatter, and he could speed up. After a long time, when Chu Feng arrived at the foot of the mountain, the sun had already set. Fortunately, the 3 unusual creatures didn't chase him down. They were still fighting on the top of the mountain. Chu Feng was covered in sweat. After such a strenuous exercise on such a high mountain, no matter how good his physique was, he still felt exhausted. He was so tired that he sat at the foot of the mountain and gasped for breath. After a long time, he could still hear his heart beating fast. He poured water into his mouth. Looking back at the mountain behind him, it was really like a mystery. The bronze monument of the Western King, the mysterious bronze house, and the bronze mountain. Was the inside of the towering mountain really made of copper? If possible, he really wanted to peel off the soil layer of this mountain and take a closer look at what was inside. This mountain was only one of the Kunlun mountain range. What kind of secret was hidden in this area? I have to leave quickly. If those 3 creatures come down, it will be extremely dangerous. There was an earthquake a few days ago, and there were many big cracks on the mountain. The foot of the mountain was no exception. Chu Feng carefully avoided the cracks when he stepped down. Inadvertently, he saw a stone in a crack. It was more than 3 inches tall, square, and had a very regular shape, which was rare. Chu Feng picked it up and continued on his way. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but along the way, Chu Feng always felt that there was something strange in his body. It was very subtle. Occasionally, he would feel a trace of warmth flowing in his blood and flesh. When he tried to feel it carefully, it would disappear. If he didn't care about it, it would appear inadvertently. Was it an illusion, or was it an allergy? He wondered if his perception was messed up. It started from this hand. He opened his left hand. The first thing he felt was the palm of his left hand, but there was nothing there. 4 petals had mysteriously withered in my left hand. Chu Feng thought about this matter as he hurried on his way. He felt that it was not that simple. There was something strange about this matter, which made him very uneasy. The petals used to emit white mist and specks of light. No matter how he looked at it, it was strange. The bronze Kunlun mountain behind him had really impacted his original concept today. It was subversive, and he couldn't help but think more. Those 3 creatures are not ordinary. They are fighting for the flower on the tree, so it should be harmless. Although he had some misgivings, Chu Feng felt that the flower should be harmless to the body. Otherwise, why would it cause a fight between the rare beasts? He shook his head and temporarily stopped thinking about it. He strode towards the herdsman's residential area. Under the curtain of night, the boundless plateau was exceptionally quiet. Occasionally, the roar of a beast would come from afar, adding a sense of emptiness and desolation. Chu Feng stayed at the herdsman's house. He decided to set off on his return journey tomorrow. At night, he quietly read a book and at the same time felt the trace of warmth from before. However, it was elusive, and he didn't know if there would be any changes. After a long time, he sighed softly, let nature take its course. Because, no matter how many times he tried, he found that the more he cared about it, the more he couldn't feel it. On the contrary, if he ignored it, he could vaguely feel it. Pollen catalyst. Chu Feng softly read these words. He suddenly thought of something. When they graduated and left school, Linoy's family had sent a car to pick her up. They had vaguely mentioned these words, but it was a bit far away, so he couldn't hear it clearly. Although they had broken up, he still wanted to send her off. However, when he saw the Lin family looking at him coldly, Chu Feng only waved his hand and left. Slightly lost in thought, he inadvertently saw a stone beside him. The shape of this stone is so regular. He weighed the stone in the tent. Although it was a cube, the edges were not angular and slightly smooth, as if it had been polished. It was slightly round. Looking closely, there was a blurry pattern on the stone. Was it formed naturally? The pattern was very dim, and it was easy to miss it if one didn't look carefully. Is it a man-made trace? When he was at the foot of Mount Kunlun, he didn't pay much attention to it. He just felt that it was regular, so he picked it up. Along the way, he was thinking about Mount Tong, so he absent-mindedly tossed it in his hand and brought it back. Now, he suddenly found that there was something special about this stone. Chu Feng washed the stone and carefully observed it under the light. The stone was 3 inches high, grayish-brown, and there were some blurry patterns around it. They looked like vines, but also like natural marks. It looked very old. Is it an ancient stone tool left by an ancient tribe? He guessed. Chapter 6. At night, the tent was very quiet, but the sudden sound broke the silence. Chu Feng's hands froze there, and all his movements stopped. How could a square stone make such a sound? A crack appeared on the stone. Chu Feng put it down, afraid that some unforeseen event would happen. He observed it carefully. After experiencing some strange things today, he was especially cautious. Stone box? He was surprised. The patterns around the stone had once covered this crack. Now that it was slightly opened, it could be seen clearly. Previously, the stone box was too seamless, as if it was a hole. Moreover, it was covered with spots, so it was difficult to notice anything unusual. Who would notice that it was a square stone box? It was 3 inches tall and very simple. At this point, Chu Feng was somewhat expectant because the stone box was somewhat mysterious. He had picked it up at the foot of Mount Kunlun. At first, he thought it was just a stone, but who would have thought that it was actually something else? Chu Feng used the copper basin in the tent to block in front of him. Then, he carefully opened the stone box and made the crack bigger. Crack! The lid came off, but there was nothing unusual. No danger occurred. Chu Feng was relieved and looked inside the stone box. He was a little hopeful. What was sealed inside? The space inside the stone box was very small, with only a very shallow groove. It could hardly contain anything, so it was obviously impossible to hide pearls and jade. However, there was indeed something inside. In the groove, there were 3 shriveled seeds that completely filled the space. Apart from that, there was nothing else. Chu Feng was quite disappointed. He had picked up the stone box at Mount Kunlun. He had thought that it hid some secret treasure, but it turned out that there were only 3 seeds inside. One seed was jet black and had long been shriveled. It seemed to be somewhat deformed and seriously lacked vitality. The other seed was purplish-brown and round, as if it had been squashed. It was the size of a fingernail. The last seed was slightly more normal. Apart from the wrinkles on its surface, it could be considered plump. At least, it was not shriveled. It was completely round, just a little withered. Chu Feng was stunned. Just these 3 seeds? 2 of them were even shriveled beyond recognition. This was really very different from what he had imagined. He had thought that the stone box he had picked up at the foot of the Kunlun Mountains was a little mysterious, and that there might be something extraordinary sealed inside, but it turned out to be so ordinary. He placed the 3 seeds in his palm and looked at them carefully. There was really nothing special about them. How many years has this thing been buried underground? It was hard to judge, but judging from the age of the stone box, it was definitely old enough. The markings on the box were already blurry. Was this something from ancient times? However, if they were antiques, the fact that the 3 seeds hadn't decayed after they were unearthed was already good enough. Some of the ancient objects that were sealed underground might be immediately destroyed once they came into contact with sunlight. Chu Feng looked at them again and again. He really couldn't recognize what kind of seeds they were. He had never seen them before, so he didn't know which 3 plants they corresponded to. He was a little speechless. Just a moment ago, he had the fiery thought of peeking at the secret treasure, but now he was staring blankly at the 3 dry seeds. I'll find a chance to plant it and see what it will grow, Chu Feng pondered. However, the 3 seeds were a little old, and he was a little worried. Could they still germinate? 2 of them had already withered. If it really can grow, it'll be fine as long as it's not poisonous grass. If it grows beans or vegetables, it'll probably be an ancient species. He laughed. The starry sky of the plateau seemed to be very close to the ground. The stars were shining brightly, and the moonlight was like water, sprinkling on this desolate and somewhat barren land. It was especially quiet late at night. In the haze, Chu Feng heard the loud roar of a beast coming from the direction of the Kunlun Mountains. The roar echoed among the mountains, which woke him up from his dream. The lodging place was very far away, but he could actually hear the dull roar of a beast in the middle of the night. It was really shocking. Obviously, something was happening in the Kunlun Mountains. It didn't sound like the roar of the mastiff or the yak, but some other ferocious beast had appeared. The ground of the mountain range was faintly trembling, and the sound was transmitted over. It was getting more and more restless. Some herdsmen were awakened with a start. They prayed devoutly and worshipped the holy mountain, mumbling something. Chu Feng also got up and walked out of the tent. He heard the words of an old herdsman. The living Buddha in the mountain has really awakened. Chu Feng didn't understand. Even if there was an ancient monk, why would it be accompanied by the roar of a beast? You don't understand. This is a legend of our Tibetan land. You should quickly leave tomorrow morning. The old herdsman said. Could it be that the sacred beasts in the mountains are coming out? Another middle-aged man said. Legend has it that there were a few ancient beasts sleeping in the depths of the plateau. Some of them were comparable to the gods and had extraordinary strength. They could subdue demons, and some were extremely ferocious and could cause disasters. After hearing this, Chu Feng pondered for a while. Although he didn't completely believe it, he didn't feel that the Tibetan's words were baseless. After all, he had personally experienced the incident at the Bronze Mountain and had indeed seen some strange beasts. For example, that golden ferocious bird was 5 or 6 meters long. If it was in ancient times, it would most likely be called the golden-winged roc. That completely black yak was over a zhang long. Even leopards and green wolves were afraid of it. It possessed extraordinary strength, and when it stepped on the bronze mountain top, it would make it tremble. If it was in the ancient times, it would most likely be called the ox demon. Some of the ancient legends were often exaggerated. After a long time, they became myth. Especially when the ancient people recorded strange stories, they would always exaggerate. It was probably the same here. After midnight, the empty plateau finally quieted down. The dull roars of the beasts in the distant mountains disappeared. The moonlight was like water, sprinkling down like thin smoke. This place seemed to be connected with the starry sky, hazy and tranquil. The herdsman was no longer worried, and let out a long sigh. Chu Feng also returned to his tent and fell into a deep sleep. The next day, Chu Feng set off early in the morning. Soon after, he arrived at a large city in the west. He was going to board the train from here to go home. After the reconstruction of the post-civilization era, although it wasn't as splendid as it used to be, the difference wasn't too great. All kinds of transportation were also considered convenient. During this period, Chu Feng had been in the wilderness and had cut off contact with the outside world. Now that he had entered the large city, he felt as if he had been in another world. He had been in the highlands, deserts, and mountains. His communication device had been turned off. When he turned it on again, many messages arrived at the same time. His parents warned him to be careful and pay attention to his safety. There were also classmates and friends asking him when he would be going back and other news. Chu Feng replied to them one by one until he boarded the train. Apart from buying a pile of snacks, he didn't bring much with him. He had disposed of everything on his way back. After finding his seat, he put down his things. He picked up the communicator and began to read the recent news. He was immediately amazed. These days, there had been heavy fog all over the country. Even foreign countries were the same. There were light blue, dark red, and even purple. It had fallen over a large area. Some people said that this might be a mutation caused by the nuclear radiation left over from the war. However, the experts immediately refuted the rumors and told the people that everything was safe. This was just a natural fog. It would be fine after it disappeared, and there was no need to panic. There was also another opinion in the public opinion polls. They said that this was an unforeseen event, just like the previous ones in history. Regarding this, no one dared to refute it. That was because this was not the first time in the post-civilization era. The waters were very deep. What's going on? There are plants appearing in midair. This is really strange. After the train started, a fatso walked to the front of the train and sat down. He seemed to be about the same age as Chu Feng. He was of medium height with a big belly. His face was chubby and his ears were big. When he smiled, his eyes turned into two slits, just like the Maitreya Buddha. He had a unique sense of joy. When he didn't speak, he looked kind and kind. The more one looked at him, the more he looked like the Maitreya Buddha. Chu Feng immediately laughed. This person was definitely not someone to be hated. "Brother, where are you going?" The fat boy greeted him as if they were friends. "At the foot of Mount Taihang," Chu Feng replied with a smile. "Are we from the same hometown? Tell me the specific location." Fatso laughed. After asking, the two of them had the same destination. Suddenly, they felt a lot closer. They were both people from the same place. Fatso's name was Zhouquan. It was a very safe name. He used to study in the West. This time, it could be considered as a return trip. Chu Feng also noticed the news that Zhouquan mentioned. Recently, there was a report that some strange plants were found floating in the air. It was a bit strange. "I don't understand why they don't fall to the ground." Fatso Zhou mumbled. Chu Feng saw the news and was also puzzled. "Is something serious going to happen?" Zhouquan gritted his teeth. "I hope they are safe. This world is getting more and more incomprehensible," someone next to him said. "Yes, it's best if everything is peaceful. It's really a bit unsettling." This seemed to have resonated, and some people agreed. Something will happen sooner or later. These years, there have been many unexplainable mysterious phenomena. All kinds of rumors have come out, someone whispered. The place suddenly became lively. There were all kinds of comments. 2 hours later, Zhouquan and Chu Feng were very familiar. After all, they were people from the same place and were naturally close. He came over and said to Chu Feng mysteriously, "A few days ago, I heard from a relative that he knows a strange person. He said that the world is going to change greatly." "What changes will there be?" Chu Feng asked. "Some strange things will happen." Fatso Zhou's voice was very soft. "I think you are more like a strange person." Chu Feng laughed. "It's true. Don't doubt me. My relative is not a person who talks nonsense. He is usually very strict and reliable. The level of contact he has with is not ordinary. Fatso stared. Chu Feng smiled and shook his head. Fatso was a bit discouraged and said, "Actually, I don't really believe it. That strange person is talking nonsense." He revealed a few words and even hinted that some Western mythological characters were planted. He said that it's the same here. A person next to him was drinking water and happened to hear it. He spat out the water in his mouth and couldn't stop laughing. Fatso Zhou was speechless. He stuffed something into his mouth and mumbled, "The divine seed does taste good." Everyone around them laughed. Ouch! Suddenly, Zhou Quan cried out in pain and took out a bean from his mouth. "Brother, where did you buy the orchid beans? Are they still edible? They are harder than iron. My old teeth are about to break." He grimaced in pain. He threw a seed on the table with a clang. "Oh my God, it's so hard. Look at the clang. What era is this? Food safety has never been solved." Zhou Quan was furious and covered his cheek. Chu Feng was shocked because it was not the orchid beans, but the plump seed in the stone box with a withered yellow color. He took it out and wanted to show it to the people around him, but he forgot about it while chatting. He put it next to the nuts and other food. "God damn, don't you have a conscience? This is not a bean at all. What is this?" When Zhou Quan saw its shape, he was immediately angry. He shouted that he would write down the manufacturer on the food packaging and go back to complain. Chu Feng was a little guilty, but he still told him that it was not a bean in the food packaging. It was a seed he brought back from the highlands. Fatso Zhou was immediately speechless. His face was red, and he looked very uncomfortable. The surroundings were quiet at first, then there was a burst of laughter. Fatso Zhou held it in for a long time before he said, "Brother, you are really not particular. Can you just put this thing around? It's not a seed, it's a piece of iron." Chu Feng also laughed and picked out all kinds of nuts for him as an apology. At the same time, he put the 3 seeds on the table and asked the people around him what kind of plant it was. Of course, he did not tell them the origin of the 3 ancient seeds. "This one is round like a bean, but it's not. Why is there a flat one? Could it have been crushed? This one is shriveled out of shape, but it's completely black. That's rare." People were discussing, but no one could recognize it. They couldn't name it. Some people guessed that it was a vine seed in the mountains. "I really want to smash it." Zhou Quan puffed his cheeks and gently rubbed there, staring at one of the seeds. "Don't, this is a rare species. I'm going to plant it. Maybe it will grow into a goddess." Chu Feng laughed. According to what Zhou Quan said, it's really hard to say. The others laughed and followed to make fun of him. "Grow a goddess? I think it will most likely grow 3 old llamas or 3 old Taoists," Zhou Quan said, covering his mouth as if he was in pain. Time passed quickly along the way. However, when the train stopped at a certain station on the road, it did not continue. What happened? After stopping for a long time, many people could not sit still and got up. Soon, a train attendant informed them that there was an accident on the track ahead. It was being urgently solved and would soon be on the road again. People sat down and waited patiently. "Look, there's news again. This is big news. Not only are there floating grasses in the air, but there are also trees. This picture is very clear." Zhou Quan cried and poked Chu Feng next to him, indicating him to look at the news on the communicator. "It's really strange. These things that have happened recently can't be explained. Is this still the world I know?" Someone else shouted. Obviously, not only Zhou Quan saw the news that had just appeared, but others also noticed it. Chu Feng looked carefully. The electronic picture was very clear. It should be in space. There were a few trees, floating just like that, full of vitality. Looking carefully, some trees were rich in green, some were purple-brown, and some were blood-red. It was very strange. How could these trees appear in the air? Everyone was puzzled. For a time, the noise on the train was endless. People were talking about it. This was too strange, and it was not a trivial matter. It was easy to cause panic. It wasn't until the train started again and roared away that people were distracted and their voices became a little quieter. I'm quite familiar with this road. When I went to school in the West, I went back and forth many times, Zhou Quan said, introducing the cities they passed along the way. About an hour later, the train stopped at a certain station. At the same time, Zhou Quan looked out of the window in a daze and said to himself, "That's not right. There are no mountains at this station." "Yes, I often take this route. There shouldn't be any huge mountains nearby." Someone else said doubtfully, "No, look, that isn't a mountain, it's a giant tree." Someone exclaimed. Many people leaned toward the window and looked carefully. Chu Feng was astonished. He could see clearly that it was indeed a gigantic tree. It was so huge that it looked like a mountain. It stood towering in the distance, almost reaching into the clouds. "Is there anyone who got on the train at this station? Ask them what's going on," someone said. Not long after, some people boarded the train and told the truth. Everyone was shocked and dumbfounded. It was an ancient ginkgo tree. It was very famous in the area and had been growing for hundreds of years. Just recently, for some reason, it began to grow crazily. This caused a great sensation in the local area. Many people were shocked. At present, the place had been sealed off and no one was allowed to approach. So it's true. I saw someone posting photos of it 2 days ago, but they were inexplicably deleted. It's actually true. Someone in the carriage exclaimed. Such a bizarre thing had happened. It was really hard to understand. Although an ancient tree had existed for a long time, it was impossible for it to grow to this stage in 2 or 3 days. It was too unbelievable. Time passed. The train didn't leave after stopping. In the blink of an eye, more than half an hour had passed, and it was still at the same station. The conductor explained that there was an emergency in front and it was being resolved. They would be on their way soon. On the train, people couldn't calm down. They were talking about the ancient tree and the strange tree in space. Could there be any connection between these things? In the end, people couldn't wait any longer. Some people got off the train and walked around. Zhou Quan also got off the train, but he soon returned with a strange expression and said, "Look, what kind of plant did I dig up?" There was a bit of mud stuck to his hand. He was holding a stalk of common grass, but now it was a bit special. It was green and sparkling, full of life energy. In addition, there was a red fruit that was the size of a fist, releasing a fragrant smell. This is a big discovery. A weed grew a bright red fruit, and the fragrance assailed the nostrils. Zhou Quan said with a trembling voice. Chapter 8. Linoy's words that day had actually come true. Even a weed by the roadside had borne a bright red fruit. It was fragrant and no longer ordinary. Chu Feng's heart could not calm down. His mind was in turmoil. This world was different. It was incomprehensible. Chu Feng's heart was pounding. This kind of change made him feel uneasy. Everything was beyond his understanding. All kinds of strange changes were taking place. Can this thing be eaten? It had to be said that Zhou Quan's heart was truly big. Smelling the rich fruit fragrance, he wanted nothing more than to take a bite. Even now, he still had this kind of mood. Try it. No, I don't dare. Who knows if it's poisonous? A weed bearing a bright red fruit, this is really like seeing a ghost. Fatso Zhou shook his head. However, he swallowed a mouthful of saliva because the fruit growing on this lush green weed was too tempting. The fragrance of the fruit assailed his nostrils, far more fragrant than any fruit he had seen before. Even Chu Feng was deeply surprised. This fruit carried a sparkling and translucent luster like a red agate. It looked extremely delicious, so how could it be grown from an ordinary weed? The others on the train were also amazed, but they were not too shocked because too many things had happened recently. In particular, the distant ancient ginkgo tree was a bit frightening. Although weeds bearing fruit was strange, people were not that afraid. However, that giant tree was different. People seriously suspected whether it was going to become a spirit and whether it would cause a disaster. Let's leave this place quickly. I keep feeling uneasy. A middle-aged man's face was pale. He did not get off the train and sat there alone. However, after the train stopped, it did not move and did not set off again. Time passed, and after another quarter of an hour, Chu Feng also got off the train and looked into the distance from the platform. That ancient tree was too majestic. Its entire body was taller than an ordinary mountain, and its luxuriant branches and leaves covered the town. It was impossible for such a giant tree not to cause a commotion. Look, what did we bring back? A few people walked over from not far away, each holding a leaf that was as tall as a person. It was a leaf of the ancient ginkgo tree, and now it was astonishingly large. There was even a young man carrying a fruit that was as large as a water basin. It was quite strenuous for him to carry it. It was a ginkgo fruit with a light yellow body. You guys picked it? Someone asked in surprise. How is that possible? I picked it up from over there. They pointed into the distance. The ginkgo tree was too huge. Some of its branches stretched across the sky and reached here. There were fallen leaves and fruits on the ground. Quite a few of the locals are preparing to leave. They are all anxious and uneasy. Someone said, understanding this situation. The train has stopped for such a long time. I want to know what's going on up ahead. This isn't the first time. Some people could not wait any longer and were extremely anxious. Until now, the flight attendants had not told them what was going on. Zhou Quan touched Chu Feng's arm and whispered, Brother, I feel that something is wrong. Nothing has happened to this railway for so many years. Today is too strange. I hope we can leave soon. Chu Feng nodded. More than an hour passed. Many people felt impatient and impatient. They could no longer wait any longer. Only then did the train start again. It was finally about to leave this place. Thank God, we are finally leaving. An old man heaved a sigh of relief. In fact, many people felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted from their shoulders. In the distance, dark clouds rolled. With a crack, a bolt of lightning struck down. The weather had changed too quickly. In the blink of an eye, there would be a storm. For a moment, this area became dark. Fortunately, they were all on the train. Oh my God, why is that place glowing? Someone exclaimed. Through the glass window, they could see that the giant tree in the distance was covered in a layer of green light. It was hazy and terrifying. The tree was swaying. Amidst the lightning and thunder, it seemed somewhat demonic. Was the lightning covering it? Or was it emitted by itself? Such a tall tree would most likely be destroyed. Boom! Suddenly, people heard a loud noise. The giant tree glowed. Many branches broke and many huge leaves fell. Dark clouds covered the sky and the sky was dark. Only there was light so they could see. One ginkgo fruit after another broke open. Then, a strange scene appeared. They were actually like dandelion seeds, flying all over the sky. The fallen fruits emitted a hazy light. They carried silver-white fluff and floated into the distance like little umbrellas. Is this a ginkgo tree or a dandelion? Fatso Zhou swallowed hard because he felt his throat was dry. This scene was too strange. Within the carriage, people were dumbfounded. That scene was too mystical and made people panic. It was too inconceivable. When the sky was filled with seeds, amidst the lightning, the ancient tree became quiet. Its branches were stable and no longer broke. It stood tall. Until the heavy rain poured down, the curtain of rain blurred the windows and nothing could be seen. People were still absent-minded. The train went far away and nothing could be seen. Brother, is this world crazy or are you and I crazy? What did I see? Why does it conflict with what I knew in the past? Zhou Quan said to Chu Feng. He wasn't the only one who was shocked. Everyone on the train fell into silence and couldn't recover for a long time. They were already far away from that place and didn't know what would happen behind them. They felt that the world was restless and everything was somewhat different. Many people looked down at the communicator in their hands and checked the news, hoping to get clues from there. However, there was no news about the ancient ginkgo tree. However, there were many reports of abnormalities in other places. In some places, rare beasts that had disappeared for thousands of years were found, and in some places, ancient wells that had dried up for hundreds of years were beginning to gush with sweet spring water. All kinds of omens were very unusual, as if they were revealing something. Purple clouds are flowing on Mount Wangu. Is this true or false? Some people were bewildered. This report was shocking, but according to the comments on the communicator, most people didn't believe it. After experiencing the unusual incident, many people on the train were still skeptical. Later, there was another report that the surface of Daunting Lake was lustrous, hazy, and white mist curled up like a fairyland. This caused people to speculate and discuss. As time went by, they had passed the rainstorm area and entered another world. The sky was very bright, which was completely different from the dark world. An hour later, there was new news about the trees floating in space. It was a clear picture taken by a satellite, which was reported both at home and abroad. Those trees grew extremely fast, and according to botanists, they were all species that could be found on the ground. How could they be high in the sky and grow suspended there? So far, relevant parties had not explained. There was no doubt that the journey of this train was extremely unsmooth. It stopped again in the evening. Moreover, it stopped in the wilderness in the middle of nowhere, which was not a normal place to stop. People were dissatisfied and asked the conductor what was going on. We have been informed that for some reason, there are various problems on this line. In some places the tracks are not smooth. We will probably have to stop completely. People were in an uproar and then there was some panic. The conductor told them that there was an emergency inspection ahead, and they had to ensure enough safety and stability before they could continue. In the evening, Chu Feng talked to his parents on the phone. There were abnormal signs everywhere, and he was very worried about them. In fact, his parents were also worried that he would encounter all kinds of problems in the outside world. Sure enough, after the train stopped, it did not move. They were afraid that there would be a major safety accident. Before the hidden dangers were eliminated, it would not move. In the carriage, many people were communicating, and some were panicking, because all kinds of signs showed that there was no peace everywhere, and they were eager to return to the familiar place of residence. The conductor and others prepared water and food for everyone. If not for the delay, according to the current speed of the train, they would have reached the terminal station in the evening. At night, people were very uneasy, and it was difficult for them to sleep. They talked in low voices. It was not until late at night that the train gradually quieted down. It was pitch black outside, not even starlight could be seen. It was a little cold and frightening. Dong! Suddenly, in the middle of the night, a violent tremor woke everyone in the carriage. They all opened their eyes and looked around in confusion. What happened to actually make the heavy train tremble? Was something hitting it? Many people's faces were slightly pale, and they looked out of the window uneasily. However, it was pitch black outside. This was a mountainous area, and in this night without starlight they could not see anything at all. It was so dark that it made people's hearts palpitate, and they felt waves of cold. The mountain stretched across, and the forest was overgrown. Occasionally, the sounds of wild beasts and night owls could be heard, making people feel scared. Dong! Another violent tremor, and the carriage shook, causing some people to scream. What's outside? How much strength does it take to push the train? There was a lot of noise. Stop shouting! Chu Feng shouted. If they panicked first, it was easy to cause big problems. I know that this place is an ancient battlefield, and many people died in the past," a middle-aged woman said with a trembling voice. "Shut up, don't talk nonsense." Fatso Joe roared, but his face was not very good, and it was a little pale. He often took this route and he knew what this place was. "There are no ghosts in this world. Even if there are, it is just an electromagnetic field, and it will dissipate soon. How can it shake the train?" Another person stood up and said, calming everyone's emotions. Then, everyone found that all the communication devices were cut off from the outside world. At this moment, their hearts were cold, and they felt a burst of horror. This night was destined to be a sleepless night, and no one was in the mood to sleep. Many people were terrified, and they looked uneasily out of the pitch-black window, looking forward to the early dawn, because they always felt that there was a huge monster wandering around, and it was extremely oppressive. Before dawn, the sky was slightly dark, and there was a heavy fog outside. The vast expanse of whiteness completely covered the mountain. "What's the situation outside?" Zhou Quan asked. "Let's go down and have a look," Chu Feng said. "No, I'm not going." Zhou Quan shook his head vigorously. "I think there should be no problem. If there was something, it would have happened long ago," Chu Feng said. In the end, Chu Feng, Zhou Quan, and a few other young people decided to get off the train, wanting to see what exactly was going on. The white fog was rolling, and standing a few meters away, they could not see the figure clearly. It was really a bit evil and strange, and it was frightening. The surroundings were quiet, and there was no sound. "Oh my God, what is that?" Suddenly, a young man shouted, extremely frightened, and his eyes were wide open, staring at the air. Chapter 9. Although it was close to dawn, the sky was still dark, especially the rare fog that covered the mountains and forests. Nothing could be seen in the vast expanse of whiteness. This was a kind of tense atmosphere, and the young man suddenly shouted. At this moment, people's taut nerves could not bear it. Two of the people who came out of the carriage were so scared that they almost fell to the ground. They could not help but shout with fear. "What are you shouting for? Do you want to scare people to death?" Zhou Quan glared. He was also frightened, and the hair on his neck stood up. "What did you see?" Chu Feng asked. He walked together with Zhou Quan, and there was still a short distance between them and the people. The fog was so thick that people could not be seen beyond a few meters. "Kiki, Kiki." The man's teeth were chattering, and his lips were trembling. He pointed to the air, and his legs did not listen to him. He wanted to retreat, but he was frozen there. "There is a black shadow there, I see it." "What is that?" The two people who were frightened earlier also raised their heads, and their voices were trembling like the man. Then, they staggered and quickly retreated, trembling with fear. At this moment, there was no peace in the carriage. People heard the sound outside, and some women suddenly screamed. It was a scene of panic. This was originally an ancient battlefield, and it was said that many people had died in the past. Now, it was shrouded in fog, and the communication device had inexplicably lost contact with the outside world. How could people not be frightened? Some people cried out in fear. "I haven't seen it clearly. What is it called? What is there to be afraid of?" Chu Feng shouted. He walked over together with Zhou Quan, and vaguely saw a black shadow hanging in the air. It was very hazy, blocked by the fog, and could not be seen clearly. The man from before shouted again. He was closest to the black shadow in the air, just below it. He could not control himself and fell to the ground, rolling and crawling, as if he had suffered the most terrible shock. "Blood, blood, I see him!" His legs were stiff, and now, after suffering a violent shock, he could finally move. He rolled and crawled, trying to escape. "God, there's blood on your face!" Not far from him, the two people saw the blood on his face and became terrified. This place was extremely strange, and it made their scalps go numb to the point that they were about to split open. It's not mine, it's over there, it's dripping from his body. The frightened man's face was full of fear as he pointed at the sky. It really smells like blood, Zhou Quan muttered. Chu Feng took a few big steps and rushed over. He saw a black shadow in midair. It looked like a person was hanging there. It was dark and there was blood dripping down. A malicious ghost. There's a malicious ghost hanging in the air. The severely frightened man shouted loudly. He crawled up, turned around, and rushed towards the carriage. The other two also fled with him. Fatso Zhou felt a chill run down his spine. He braced himself and approached Chu Feng. He did not run away with Chu Feng, but he did have some courage. A person really died here. Is this murder? Zhou Quan looked up. There was a pool of blood on the ground, and the black shadow was hanging in midair, swaying with the wind. It was a corpse, and blood was still flowing down. How can he be hung in midair? Chu Feng felt a little cold. Even though he was very brave, he felt a burst of cold air at this time. Yes, there is still some distance from here to the trees. How can he be hanging in midair? Zhou Quan's eyes widened, and then he staggered backward. He was also a little scared. The people on the carriage heard their conversation and became even more afraid. There were women screaming in fear, and there were also cowardly crying. It was a scene of panic. Malicious ghost. There's a malicious ghost hanging in midair. The young man who first escaped to the carriage was pale, and he murmured there. Especially with the blood dripping down his face, he looked very ferocious. He caused the atmosphere of fear on the carriage to become even more intense. The train stopped in the mountains. Many people had died here, and now that the fog was so strange, how could they not panic? Don't be afraid, it's just a corpse. There's no malicious ghost. Chu Feng said. His voice was very loud, and he calmed everyone's emotions. Zhou Quan also calmed down because standing there was no danger. He became a little more courageous and shouted, "If he screams and scares people there again, you guys just throw him down." In fact, Chu Feng and Zhou Quan were also uncertain. That was because the corpse hanging in midair had very long and thick hair that covered his entire face. As it swayed in the wind, the scene was truly hair-raising. "Come down, a few strong guys, let's get him down together and see how he died. Isn't it just a corpse? What's there to be afraid of?" Zhou Quan shouted. In fact, he was also afraid, so he called a few more people down to embolden himself. When the people saw that the two of them were so calm and not afraid, they immediately calmed down, and they were not so frightened. Not long after, a few tall and strong young men got off the carriage and stood with the two of them, sizing up the mysterious shadow hanging in midair. Chu Feng climbed to the roof of the carriage, where he could see more clearly, and at the same time, if he wanted to get the corpse down, this was also the only place where he could barely stretch out his hand. When he stood there, Chu Feng's heart skipped a beat, because the person's clothing was incompatible with the modern era. No matter how he looked at it, it was even more frightening. Coupled with the head of thick hair that covered the head, it looked even more horrifying. Is something really strange going to happen? He had some misgivings in his heart. Zhou Quan also climbed up. Although he was fatso, his stamina was quite good, and he did not make people feel that he was clumsy, so he climbed up in a few steps. When the few strong young men behind saw this, they became bolder, and with more people together, they felt that they were not afraid, so they followed one after another. Is this filming? What is he wearing? When Fatso Zhou saw the person clearly, he was so scared that he almost cursed. Who is he? Why is he dressed like that? A young man looked unnatural. Why do I feel that this is an ancient person? Could it be buried under this battlefield? Could it? Why is he hanging in midair? Another person said. As soon as these words came out, the people on the roof felt a chill, and a layer of cold air enveloped their bodies, making the area a little cold. What's on his body? Are those iron chains? Why is he falling from the sky? This shouldn't be impossible. Fatso Zhou could not stay calm. He tugged at Chu Feng's sleeve and said in a low voice, "Brother, we can't afford to provoke this matter, and if we encounter something that can't be explained, let's go." The fog was thick, and everything could not be seen clearly. In midair, there seemed to be iron chains as thick as an arm hanging down. The corpse was hanging, and it made people's scalp tingle, like a scene of torture in hell. When the others heard Fatso Zhou's words, their expressions suddenly changed. They turned around and wanted to jump out of the car. This place made people feel uneasy, and it made them feel scared. "It's okay, it's vines, not iron chains." Chu Feng spoke at the right time, and it shocked everyone. Mountain vines, how did they grow here? Fatso Zhou was suspicious. He looked carefully, and in the fog, there seemed to be some leaf-like things on the iron chains. "It really seems to be vines." Someone nodded and let out a long breath. A tall young man shook his head and said, "I guess this person fell from the mountain. These filming people are really desperate, they even put their lives on the line." Chu Feng took off his shirt, grabbed a sleeve, and then swung it hard, wrapping it around a vine. He pulled it hard and pulled it over. The corpse immediately swayed and swayed over. Ah! Two people were quite frightened. "I say, brother, you are too brave. Are you going to make a move just like that?" Fatso Zhou was shocked, but he quickly calmed down and hurried to help. "Come over quickly, give me a hand," Zhou Quan called out to the others. The few people braced themselves and walked over, really unwilling to touch the corpse. Chu Feng was startled, because when he pulled the vine over, he saw an object, simple and shocking. It was a short sword, completely black, without any bright luster, as if it was cast from black gold. It was held in the hand of the corpse, and it didn't let go until death. They removed the entangling vines and put the corpse down. "There's another sword?" The few people were very surprised. Chu Feng pried the hand of the person, and took the black gold short sword in his hand. He was quite surprised. This sword was only a foot long, but it was very heavy. "Let me see, Fatso Zhou took it, and his hand trembled, almost letting the black sword fall. He cried out in surprise, "How can it be so heavy?" The others were a bit disgusted, unwilling to touch the sword, and they were looking at the corpse. "Put him on the ground." Zhou Quan passed the short sword to Chu Feng, and then called out to the others to move the corpse. Not long after, some people came out of the carriage and surrounded the corpse on the ground. They all felt waves of fear, and at the same time, there was a puzzled expression. This was a tall man, and his clothes were incompatible with this era. At the same time, his wound was very fatal. There was a bloody hole in his chest, and it was as big as a fist. Blood dripped down, and even now, it hadn't dried up. This seems to have been pierced by a thick, sharp weapon, and even the breastbone that was touched was neatly broken, leaving behind a terrifying bloody hole. Someone said in a low voice. It was too tragic, and the women in the carriage didn't dare to look at it. "Brother, why haven't you come down yet?" Zhou Quan was puzzled, and he shouted at Chu Feng on the roof of the carriage. Chu Feng waved at him, motioning him to go up. Fatso Zhou went up to the roof again, and then followed behind Chu Feng, walking along the roof. "Look!" Chu Feng pointed with his finger. In the air, there were vines as thick as a wrist hanging down, and they could be reached with a little stretch of his hand. "Why are there so many mountain vines growing here? If this continues, the train won't be able to pass through here," Zhou Quan murmured. "This doesn't look like mountain vines, because when the train stopped yesterday, I saw that the mountains on both sides were still a long distance away from here, so mountain vines can't hang down like this," Chu Feng said, and he looked up at the sky. Zhou Quan suddenly opened his eyes wide, and with a look of surprise, he said, "If it's not mountain vines, then could it be hanging down from the sky?" He suddenly raised his head and, like Chu Feng, looked up. However, the fog was too thick and nothing could be seen. Chu Feng held the black gold short sword, pushed aside the hanging vines, stepped on the roof, and continued to walk forward. Suddenly, he stopped, and his body was a little stiff. His pupils contracted rapidly, and he was extremely shocked, and his nerves were directly stretched taut. "Why did you stop?" Fatso Zhou said from behind, and stepped forward. In an instant, he was almost petrified, and his body was stiff. In the end, he couldn't help but curse, and in the end, he couldn't help but curse. F***ck. In the second half of the night, could it be that it hit the roof of the carriage and caused the violent earthquake? He couldn't believe his eyes, and like Chu Feng, he was extremely shocked, and then he was in a daze. That thing was entangled by vines, hanging down on the roof of the carriage. Zhou Quan raised his head, and as if he was talking in a dream, he said, "This is a satellite entangled by vines hanging down from the sky?" Chapter 10. Thick fog filled the air, and vines as thick as an arm were hanging in the air. They were indistinct, but they were blocked by the fog and couldn't be seen clearly. A very heavy satellite, entangled by many vines, fell on the train. The place was completely silent, and it was as quiet as death. This scene was really shocking. That was a satellite, and it should be in space, moving in a fixed orbit. How did it fall? Chu Feng and Zhou Quan felt a chill on their backs, and they couldn't help but look up at the gray sky again. What was there? Don't tell me that these vines really fell from the sky. Zhou Quan's voice was a little hoarse, and his expression was very ugly. This scene was really difficult for him to accept, and he didn't dare to believe it. Chu Feng silently walked forward, pulled the vines aside, and carefully looked at it. He looked again, and confirmed that it was a real satellite. There was no mistake. What is going on? Zhou Quan felt that his mind was a mess. Chu Feng pondered, and he didn't know what was going on in the outside world. They should leave as soon as possible, and couldn't stay for long. "Brother, what are you doing?" Zhou Quan came back to his senses, and he saw Chu Feng using both hands to pull the hanging vines in the air. "I want to go up to the sky," said Chu Feng. "You still have the mood to joke?" Fatso Zhou was always smiling, like a benevolent Maitreya Buddha, but now his face was full of worry. The drastic changes that happened today made him panic. "I'll go up and take a look," said Chu Feng. He wanted to climb higher to take a look. "Don't, it's too dangerous. This is not the heavenly road. Do you really think you can climb to the heavenly palace?" Zhou Quan objected, and he was worried about his safety. "It's okay, I won't go very high, I just want to take a look," said Chu Feng. His excellent physique showed, and he quickly climbed up 6 or 7 meters. At this time, the mist had covered his area, and he could no longer see clearly from below. The visibility was too low. "Brother, are you okay?" Zhou Quan shouted from below. "I'm fine," Chu Feng replied. He climbed all the way up and only stopped after climbing a few dozen meters. The vines in the air are thicker and they're hanging straight down. It doesn't look like they're growing from the mountains on either side. They're hanging down from the sky. Chu Feng frowned. This was hard to believe. How could such a shocking thing happen in just one night? Then, he thought of the news he had seen earlier. Some trees had appeared in space, as well as other plants that were suspended in the air. They were all species native to Earth. They were luxuriant and full of leaves. Now, he had many ideas. Chu Feng slid down the vines. There was no need for him to take the risk. "Brother, let's hurry up and leave. We can't stay here any longer." "I feel sick," Zhou Quan said. Chu Feng nodded. The train had broken down, and it was not advisable to stay here for long. The communicator had been cut off from the outside world. He felt that he should think of a way to leave first. The successive events made him uneasy. He couldn't just passively wait. "Oh my God, what did I just see?" At this moment, a scream was heard. A few able-bodied young men also climbed onto the roof of the car. When they arrived, they saw the heavy satellite at a glance and were all dumbfounded. Their faces stiffened as if they had seen a ghost. Soon, the news spread, causing a sensation. Accompanied by panic, The mountain could no longer be peaceful. Everyone walked out of the carriage, and all kinds of cries and noises were mixed together. "It's easy to get into trouble like this," Zhou said. In a state of disorder, it was easy for all kinds of trouble to happen. But now, who could protect them? The train attendants and the others were already dumbfounded and at a loss. "What happened to that ancient person?" Chu Feng asked. "What else can happen to him? He's long dead. I just went to take a look and heard from others that he might not be an ancient person. He actually had a communicator on him," Zhou replied. "Huh!" Chu Feng was startled. He had seen everything about that person. His clothes weren't just simple retro, but they really had a special ancient charm. "Why are you thinking so much? Let's go quickly," Zhou urged. He didn't want to stay a moment longer. In fact, at this time, the others were also moving, wanting to leave this place immediately. Chu Feng weighed the black sword in his hand. It was only a foot long, but it was so heavy. Its density exceeded all kinds of metal materials he knew, which made him very suspicious. "Where's that person's communicator? Let's see who he contacted. It's too strange." Unfortunately, Chu Feng didn't get what he wanted. There were too many people here, and it was a mess. The communicator had long since disappeared. "Let's go." They didn't waste any time and quickly set off together. Groups after groups of people left, forming groups and heading for the nearest town. Chu Feng and Zhou walked along the railway. Fatso was relatively familiar with this road. In the past, he had taken the train back and forth many times. According to him, there was a small town a dozen miles across the mountains. Who did this? No wonder the train had to break down. This is too bad. On the road, Zhou was angry. After walking for a few miles, they saw a broken railway track. This was definitely a major safety hazard. If they really traveled like this, it would be a big problem. Something is wrong. After walking for another 2 miles, they saw the broken railway track again, but this time it was very strange. It didn't look like it was dug by someone, but there was something hidden. "Do you see it? The situation is not right." Zhou looked at it again and again with a solemn expression on his face. The ground seemed to have been stretched, and the area had become larger. The railway track had collapsed, so it couldn't be connected to each other. The two of them were suspicious. The original area could still be extended, and it was even larger than before. "It should be an earthquake?" Zhou said. However, they didn't feel any tremors before. The situation was very strange and shocking. Now they couldn't figure out anything. The two of them were a little scared and didn't know what was going on. As they walked forward, they heard the sound of the railway track collapsing and saw the scene. The ground seemed to be stretching and expanding. Zhou was dumbfounded. His mouth was wide open, and he couldn't say a word. "Something is wrong." Finally, he shouted. "Let's go, this area is not stable," Chu Feng said and began to speed up. Although Zhou was fat, it could be seen from climbing the train that his physical strength was actually very good. Although he was panting when running, he didn't complain about being tired. "Well, there is no way out?" In front of the railway track, there was a mountain lying across, blocking the way. The strangest thing was that after the railway track led to this place, it seemed to be pressed down by the mountain. Looking carefully, it was indeed so. Digging up the soil and stones, they could see the buried part. Not to mention Fatso Zhou, even Chu Feng was dumbfounded. He was completely dumbfounded. What was going on? Why was there a mountain pressing down here? "Are you sure there is a town ahead?" Chu Feng asked. "I am sure," Zhou said. He swore that he had never seen this mountain before. It seemed to have appeared out of thin air and was pressing down here. "There is no other way. Let's go over it. I don't believe that we can enter an unknown world," Zhou said. "Don't go around it. It's not very far." Chu Feng stopped him. Zhou was a little unwilling. He really wanted to find out where this mountain came from. How could it appear out of thin air? Roar! A loud roar shook the mountain forest. It came from that extraordinary mountain, and it was obvious that there was a terrifying beast. How is this possible? This roar is a bit shocking. But there should be no large beasts in this area. Where did it come from? Zhou Quan was shocked. Chu Feng pointed at the mountain. Fatso Zhou immediately extinguished the idea of going over the mountain and began to go around it. In the process, they heard several shocking roars of beasts, followed by the screams of people. Someone is going over the mountain! Zhou Quan's face turned pale. He was glad that they did not go that way. In the end, the two successfully went around the mountain. They continued to walk along the railway, wanting to enter the town. At the same time, they became more and more frightened on the road. The distance between the railway track and the ground seemed to have become wider and wider. What was supposed to be a dozen or so kilometers turned into a journey of over 20 kilometers in the end. Fortunately, they arrived at this small town safely. At this time, the fog finally dispersed, but the sunlight did not shine down. It was blocked. There really is a big guy. Chu Feng's expression changed. In the sky, vines hung down one after another. They were all incomparably thick and lush with leaves. Covered the sky and covered the sun. It did not look like it grew on the ground. It was as if it was born in the sky. It was like a myth. A giant vine blotted out the sky and covered the earth, covering this area. When the fog dispersed, the people in the small town also saw this scene. It immediately caused a huge panic. Run! We must leave this place as soon as possible! Zhou Quan roared. In fact, many people were running. One car after another started and drove into the distance. No, we have to quickly stop a car while the road is still open. Otherwise, we will definitely be blocked here, Chu Feng said. What are you stopping me for? Let's snatch it! Zhou Quan roared. However, in the end, they still managed to stop a car. A middle-aged man carried them out of the town and fled into the distance. After the fog dispersed, the communicators were restored, and they could contact the outside world. Chu Feng immediately opened it to see what amazing news there was. Heavens, there are all kinds of strange phenomena on Mount Song, Mount Wangu, Mount Luofu and other famous mountains. Even the rocks are flowing with purple cloud. Fatso Zhou let out a strange cry when he saw this report. Only one night had passed, but many things had happened in the outside world. Huh? Someone found a small, ordinary tree on the side of the road that bore silver fruit. After eating one, he actually grew a pair of silver wings. Zhou Quan was in a daze after reading the whole story. Chapter 11. Zhou Quan had a strange expression on his face. He seemed to be in a dilemma. He nudged Chu Feng and whispered, "You? 32? Can that person soar in the sky with a pair of silver wings?" "It's possible." Chu Feng nodded. He then found it funny and said, "It's not like you have wings. Why are you so shy? Don't I also have a bright red fruit?" Fatso Zhou carefully opened his backpack. The grass he had dug up earlier was still there. It was wrapped in a transparent bag, and thus isolated the fragrance. There was a bright red fruit on the grass. It was as big as a fist and sparkled like a red agate. When the bag was slightly opened, a rich fragrance immediately overflowed. "Say, if I eat it, will I grow something?" Fatso was very doubtful and confused. This time, Chu Feng didn't laugh. Instead, his expression was solemn. It would have been fine if he didn't know about it before. But now it seemed that the fruit of this mutated plant was extraordinary. "Wait a moment. Let's see if the man with the silver wings will still be reported," Chu Feng said. "Why is it so fragrant? What fruit are you holding?" The middle-aged man driving the car looked very surprised. The car was extremely fast. It left the small town and drove along the road to the end of the horizon. "A wild fruit. I don't know what kind it is. I don't dare to eat it," Fatso Zhou said. Indeed, he didn't dare to eat it recklessly. What if it didn't grow wings, but a horn or a tail instead? If that happened, he wouldn't even have a place to cry. Don't eat it if you don't know. It will be troublesome if you get poisoned. The middle-aged man kindly reminded him. He then sighed and was worried about his family. He was only working in the small town behind him. His family was not there. They were in another small town hundreds of miles away from here. He didn't know how his family was doing. Strange phenomena appeared in many places during the night. Especially after experiencing it himself, he was very scared. He hoped to get home as soon as possible, so he drove as fast as lightning. It had to be said that the middle-aged man's driving skills were very good. The extremely thrilling overtaking, the jolting and shaking back and forth, almost made Fatso Zhou vomit. I'm convinced, uncle, I'm convinced. At first, Zhou Quan felt excited, but later, he became dispirited and almost foamed at the mouth. Outside the car window, the trees on both sides of the road receded rapidly. Even Chu Feng felt a little dizzy. He was really worried that such a race would cause a dangerous accident. He looked behind him. That enormous green vine covered the sky and blocked out the sun. It was still clearly visible, and it hadn't left its range yet. It floated in midair, its main body far away from the ground. It was like a giant green city that was as tall as the sky, but also like the undulating mountain peaks, majestic and boundless. How huge was this? But when he thought about it, he understood. Otherwise, how could he have pulled down the man-made satellite? The middle-aged man sped for hundreds of miles in one breath. He only slowed down when he entered another small city because there were more cars. There's a follow-up report. Look, that man with silver wings can really fly in midair, and his whole body is wrapped in silver light. This is too shocking, but he looks very heroic. Zhou Quan pointed out to Chu Feng. The man's picture was very clear on the communicator. It was a very handsome young man. When his body emitted silver light, his pupils were also brilliant, and there was silver light blossoming in them. Even his hair became snow-white. Chu Feng was moved. The world was changing, and some things were becoming more and more incomprehensible. Some supernatural phenomena couldn't be explained with the original laws of the world. Why didn't you report more? Let that man tell you how he felt. Zhou Quan was very dissatisfied. He searched continuously and finally found a new report. This man has been invited away by the Celestial Biology Group. It's a big company, and they will help to check his vital signs, Zhou Quan said. Chu Feng heard this and frowned slightly. The Celestial Biology Group belonged to the Lin family, and its main business was biomedicine. He didn't know about it before, but after he broke up with Linoy, he gradually learned about it. The name, natural creature, was really, Chu Feng thought. In the past, he only thought that the leader of the Lin family was high-spirited and vigorous, so he gave it such a name. Now it seemed that there was a hidden meaning to it, because through Linoy's performance, he knew that the clan knew some of the truth, and had a premonition that the world was going to change. Ever since he understood the Lin family's background, he understood why her family had been so cold to him when he had wanted to send Lin Naoi off during his graduation, so he could only wave his hand from afar and leave. What's wrong, brother? Why are you in a daze? Zhou Quan saw him in a daze and asked. I thought of my ex-girlfriend, Chu Feng said casually. You broke up with her first? Do you regret it now? Zhou Quan laughed. No, she was the one who broke up with me. Chu Feng said frankly. There was nothing he couldn't say. He didn't think it was embarrassing, and it should have been over anyway. You've let it go so quickly? Zhou Quan was surprised, and then he wailed. His first love made him sad for 2 years, and he still hadn't gotten over it. This time, he traveled to Tibet, and it could be said that he was revisiting the old place, and at the same time, he wanted to make the final forgetting. Chu Feng said, She and I have always been very ordinary, and we didn't travel side by side many times. It started out as ordinary as water and ended as ordinary. What's going on? Zhou Quan asked curiously. Chu Feng shook his head. Although he had let it go, he didn't want to say more. Finally, after driving for hundreds of miles, the middle-aged man was almost home. Chu Feng and Zhou Quan couldn't hitch a ride anymore, so they had to get off the car early. I can't see that giant vine anymore. Zhou Quan looked back. The blue sky was not covered. He was relieved and let out a long sigh. In that area, he always felt an indescribable pressure. Half an hour later, they entered the neighboring big city and came to the long-distance bus station. There were buses heading north to Mount Taihang. After a smooth departure, both of them felt a burst of relief. Earlier, they were afraid that the bus wouldn't start under such circumstances. It seems that there is nothing wrong in this area. Only the road we went through was strange. It's all because of that giant vine, Zhou Quan said angrily. The final destination of this long-distance bus was a huge city in the north, which was known as the ancient capital of the Six Dynasties. On the way, it would pass the foot of Mount Taihang. In fact, Chu Feng and Zhou Quan's home was also the northernmost part of Mount Taihang, close to the ancient capital of the Six Dynasties. If there are no accidents, we can reach the foot of Mount Taihang before sunset, Chu Feng said. This place was 800 miles away from the huge city in the north. Even if there was a traffic jam, with the speed of the long-distance bus, they could reach before sunset. Nowadays, there were strange things happening everywhere. Now that they were on the bus, this was the most talked about. It is said that missiles have been used to blow down some things in space. Yes, I heard that too, but I haven't seen the report. I don't know whether it is true or not. There was a lot of noise on the bus. There were all kinds of discussions. Chu Feng and Zhou Quan looked at each other in bewilderment. They thought of the vines that were suspended in the air. They really needed to get rid of them at once. Time passed, and the bus moved forward steadily. Zhou Quan sighed. He searched on his communicator, but after searching for a long time, he only found the last picture. The young man with the silver wings was picked up by people from celestial biology. That was the last picture. After that, there was no follow-up news about him. Is he really being picked up for a checkup? Why does it look like they are welcoming a new rich man? Zhou Quan grumbled. Because the young man was picked up by a luxury car, and the senior members of the Lin family were there in person. Chu Feng took a look at the picture and didn't say anything. Nowadays, there were all kinds of reports which made people feel uneasy. There was a constant stream of strange things being reported. Chu Feng skimmed through the news and didn't pay attention to it anymore. He ate some food and drank some water on the bus. He began to close his eyes and gradually fell asleep. Brother, wake up. There is a problem. Zhou Quan called him. Chu Feng was pushed awake. When he opened his eyes, it was already afternoon. The sun was not far from sunset. What's wrong? He asked. The driver is a little scared. He said that he has already driven more than 1,000 miles, but we still haven't arrived. Looking at the road signs, it seems to be a few hundred miles, Zhou Quan said. Chu Feng was completely awakened. Was it the same as the area covered by the vines? The earth was expanding, as if it was being stretched. Some people thought that the driver had gone the wrong way, but he swore to himself that he had been driving this road for 5 or 6 years. He couldn't be wrong. The car was still driving, following the direction indicated by the road signs that everyone agreed with. I'm not going. What the hell? This must have something to do with the strange things reported. I still want to live, I don't want to die. The driver was also impatient. When he heard someone complain that he might have gone the wrong way, he completely gave up. Huh! Someone looked up to the left. There was a mountain there, tall and majestic, towering into the clouds. It had appeared suddenly, right next to the road, almost blocking the road. This mountain wasn't here just now. What happened? "Sir, hurry up and get out of here!" Screams came from the bus. The driver didn't say anything. He stepped on the gas pedal and sped away. He was really scared. He saw the mountain appear inexplicably with his own eyes. I really shouldn't have gone so far. He regretted and blamed himself all the way. His face was pale, and he sped up. In the bus, many people were panicking. Chu Feng and Zhou Quan had experienced such things, so they could still stay calm. However, in the end, Fatso Zhou couldn't help but pray. He whispered, "God bless us, let us go home safely." The bus was driven like crazy. It rushed all the way and almost got into a car accident several times. In fact, it was obvious that other cars had also sped up. Obviously, the people in those cars had also been scared on the road. "Thank God, we are finally back." When the stars appeared in the sky, Zhou Quan heaved a sigh of relief. He saw the familiar scenery. He saw the endless Taihang Mountains in the distance. Chu Feng also gradually relaxed. It was only a few miles away from home. At this time, he could get off the bus and walk back. However, after a few more miles, the bus suddenly braked. Many people hit the front seats, crying out in pain. "How can you drive?" someone said angrily. However, soon people became silent. The stars were twinkling, and the moonlight was like water. There was a big lake in front of them. Wisps of smoke rose from the lake. The smoke blended with the moonlight, as if it was covered by a thin layer of gauze. The lake was very big. Under the light of the stars and the moonlight, it emitted a faint luster, with an indescribable spirit and elegance. It was indeed beautiful. It was as clear as a fairy lake, absorbing the essence of the sun and the moon. "What's going on? The road is broken. How come there is a big lake out of nowhere?" Zhou Quan was shocked. It was not far from his home. He grew up in this area and had never seen this big lake. "The road stopped here. What are you waiting for? Get off the bus and go around," Chu Feng urged. From Chu Feng's point of view, the sudden appearance of the lake was similar to the sudden appearance of the mountains in front of him. The land was expanding and changing. Some of the mountains and terrains that were unknown to the world in the past were emerging and showing themselves. The people on the bus were divided into two groups. Some wanted to go around, and some wanted to stay where they were until dawn. Chu Feng and Zhou Quan trudged for dozens of miles before they went around the big lake. They walked until late at night and finally saw a small town in the distance. That was the town of Sp, where Fatso Zhou's home was. And Chu Feng's home was more than 10 miles away. "We are finally home." Fatso Zhou was very happy. He was completely relieved. What is that?" Chu Feng looked towards the direction of the Taihang Mountains. Suddenly, a series of rumbling noises could be heard. Towering mountains that pierced through the clouds appeared out of nowhere. They were too majestic. They were thousands of meters high, even tens of thousands of meters high. In one breath, hundreds of thousands of mountains appeared. Compared to them, the original mountain range seemed too short. Chapter 12. Late at night, the Taihang Mountains rumbled incessantly. Hundreds and thousands of majestic mountains rose from the ground, appearing out of thin air. It was a magnificent sight. Some of the mountains were over 1,000 feet high, like divine swords piercing the sky. They were extremely steep and unclimbable. Some of the mountains were magnificent and majestic. Their whole bodies were huge, like the ancient demonic bulls in the myth. They carried a wild and desolate aura as they stood there, towering tens of thousands of meters high. On some of the mountains, silver waterfalls hung down. Looking from afar, they looked like streaks of silk under the moonlight. The mist was dense and the spiritual energy was dense. "Is this still the Taihang Mountains that I know?" Zhou Quan was inexplicably shocked. He almost bit his lips to make sure that this was not a dream. The world had been turned upside down. The miraculous scenes were astounding and hard to believe. Chu Feng was in a daze. He was also a bit absent-minded. In front of him, huge mountains appeared out of thin air. They were much taller than the original Taihang mountains. They were overflowing with colorful lights and full of spiritual energy. It was like a fairyland. The Taihang mountains were much wider and more majestic than before. Chu Feng and Zhou Quan both grew up in this area. They were all too familiar with it. The changes in front of them could be described as magnificent. A wild and desolate aura was blowing in their faces. This caused them to be both shocked and alarmed. What do you think? Do you think there are divine fruits and immortal abodes in there? Zhou Quan's eyes shone with excitement. The two of them had seen some reports on their communicators. Mount Song, Mount Wangu, and other places had all kinds of miraculous scenes. Even ordinary rocks were flowing with purple clouds. The young man who ate the strange silver fruit and grew silver wings lived near Mount Wangu. He was later picked up by people from celestial biology. This made Zhou Quan's heart beat faster and his imagination ran wild. Chu Feng was very calm. He said, "Wake up. Don't think too highly of this. There are so many huge mountains. There must be many ferocious birds and beasts inside. If a few of them break out, it will be a disaster." Zhou Quan's heart skipped a beat. It was not impossible. It could happen at any time. Roar, as if to confirm Chu Feng's words, a beast's roar came from the depths of the mountain. Then, clouds of smoke erupted, and a huge beast roared at the sky, venting its anger. Zhou Quan's hair stood on end. He looked at the mountain range and carefully searched for the source of the sound. "It's that huge mountain. Why do I see a monster howling at the top of the mountain?" He stuttered as he pointed at a huge mountain in the mountain range. It was extremely far away, but he could vaguely make out a wave of fiery light jumping about. It was as if a red-furred wild beast was overlooking this place, roaring. Then, it devoured the essence of the sun and moon. There really were ferocious beasts, and their home was just outside the Taihang Mountains. It was too dangerous. Zhou Quan's face was pale. He and Chu Feng had encountered such a thing as soon as they returned. Could it be that they couldn't stop and had to start running again? Phew, the wind seemed to have picked up in the distance. A dark cloud floated past and finally landed on the mountain. A giant bird. Chu Feng's eyelids twitched. How big was that bird? Am I seeing it right? Zhou Quan's Adam's apple trembled as he swallowed hard. The giant bird's body was gray and hazy, and it fell into the depths of the mountain range. If it targets the people outside and hunts for food, we won't be able to escape even if we want to. Zhou Quan sighed. That kind of raptor was fast. If it wanted to leave the mountain, it could reach them in the blink of an eye. While they were talking, a purple raptor appeared in the mountain range. It was not as big as the previous one, but it was not small either. It seemed to be more than 10 meters long. It spread its wings and soared towards the outside of the mountain range. It was very special. Its wings were shining brightly and had an amazing luster, as if it was cast from metal. Oh no, I really jinxed it. There really is a ferocious bird coming out. Zhou Quan wanted to slap himself. Both of them felt a chill run down their spines. They quickly hid behind a tree by the roadside, afraid that they would be discovered and become the bird's first prey. In the dark night, the divine bird emitted a bright light. Like a purple waterfall, it rushed towards the outside of the mountain. It let out a long cry, as if it was very excited and longing for something. Boom! All of a sudden, a ball of purple flame burst out from its body, illuminating the sky and making it as bright as day. The raging fire was burning. This scene made people's hearts tremble. That kind of fire made people's hearts palpitate even from far away. Feeling the waves of heat rushing down from the sky, Zhou Quan wiped the sweat off his forehead. The purple giant bird was like a purple sun in the sky, making the area exceptionally bright. How terrifying! This is a demonic bird. Just one of it is enough to destroy an entire town, Zhou Quan whispered. His heart was full of worry. Chu Feng was also silent. Only God knew how many terrifying birds and beasts there were in the Taihang Mountains. Just a moment ago, hundreds and thousands of huge mountains appeared. However, a mournful cry in the sky stunned the two of them. The purple flame was torrential. That giant bird was burning, wailing and struggling violently. Then, it fell to the ground. What situation was this? Chu Feng and Zhou Quan looked at each other in dismay. Just now, it was majestic and awe-inspiring. It looked as if it was about to spread its wings and pounce towards the outside of the mountain. They thought that those flames were a display of its strength. Who would have thought that in the end it would ignite itself? Puff! In midair, there was a sound of explosion. The purple giant bird disintegrated with a loud bang before it landed on the ground. Accompanied by the flames, it turned into a large pile of ashes, swirling in the air. It died just like that? For a long time, neither Chu Feng nor Zhou Quan said a word. Bless the sacred mountain! Finally, Zhou Quan broke the silence. He cupped his fists and bowed towards the direction of the Taihang Mountains. This fatso was a little superstitious. It was also forced by all kinds of strange things. Suddenly, there was another movement in the depths of the Taihang Mountains. A monster was glowing red. Its body looked like a giant crocodile standing upright, but it had wings that were 10 meters long. Its entire body was red in color. It was flying towards the outside. Boom! When it was close to the outside of the mountain, a fierce ball of flame exploded. It was also burning. Screaming in pain, it fell from the sky and turned into black ashes. Another big guy died. At this point, Chu Feng and Zhou Quan had a slight inkling of what was going on. They couldn't get out? The two of them looked at each other and hesitated. Should we go and take a look? The world had changed drastically. Strange phenomena were everywhere. They knew that the world would be completely different in the future. If they were bold and proactive enough, they might be able to find some inexplicable opportunities in the early days. Of course, they might also lose their lives in vain. The two of them were brave. Although they had some concerns, they couldn't help but walk forward. It was impossible to enter the mountain. They just wanted to take a look outside the mountain. What was there? Why did the giant beast burn? It didn't look very far, but they walked for many miles before they reached the exit of the mountain. There were large patches of black ashes on the ground. There were also broken bones and scorch marks. Those were the parts that hadn't been completely burned. Why do I feel like there's a monstrous murderous aura in front of us? For some reason, Zhou Quan felt his legs were trembling. He couldn't even stand straight. His calves and stomach were cramping, and they were shaking non-stop. Chu Feng also felt uneasy. He felt like he was being stared at by a ferocious beast. His body was stiff, and his hair stood on end. His eyelids were twitching non-stop. The two of them took a deep breath and continuously retreated. Their initial thoughts were too simple. They couldn't get too close to this mountain range. It was completely different from before. A moment later, when they hid in the forest, they suddenly saw pairs of lantern-like spheres of light appear at the exit of the mountain range. Some were blood red, some were deep blue, and some were golden. They were all extremely cold. There were too many of them. That place was densely packed. Eyes. There are pairs of eyes there. They want to come out. Zhou Quan cried out in a low voice. He was almost scared out of his wit. There were so many pairs of eyes in the pitch-black mountain pass. Many of them were as big as water basins. Just the thought of them made one's scalp go numb. For some reason, that place was extremely dark. It was different from the glowing depths of the mountain range. The light seemed to have been absorbed, and only those terrifying and emotionless eyes could be seen. Bang! Suddenly, a creature rushed out. The ground trembled and the forest swayed. Leaves rustled and fell. It was a terrifying scene. However, just like what they had seen before, it disintegrated with a loud bang as soon as it rushed out of the mountain pass. It turned into flames and burned to a crisp. It's self-immolating. Does it not want to live any more? Zhou Quan mumbled. He spoke casually, but in fact, his legs were trembling. Following that, a series of roars were heard. Wild beasts rushed out, and there were even silver spiders the size of houses. It was a terrifying scene, but the end result was the same. All of them turned into ashes. Not a single one of them made it to the outside world alive. The divine mountain of Taihang. Zhou Quan almost knelt down. He couldn't stop mumbling. After a long time, there was no more movement in the pitch-black mountain pass. It was absolutely silent. However, the ancient killing intent was still there. Clearly, it was still dangerous. Those creatures didn't leave. It was only when golden clouds flowed and a hazy light appeared that the silence was broken. A calf was about a meter tall. It slowly moved outwards. It seemed to be afraid, but at the same time there was hope in it. It moved cautiously and carefully. Is this calf made of gold? Zhou Quan was dumbfounded. Chu Feng was also surprised. He looked forward. The calf's entire body was golden. It glowed in the darkness. Its hair was shiny, as if it was made of gold. Even its pupils and a pair of small horns were golden. It didn't have the clumsiness of an ordinary cow. It had a spiritual nature and was obviously extraordinary. At the very least, no one had ever seen a calf that looked like gold. The mountain pass was very quiet. Pairs of cold lantern-like eyes stared at the golden calf, waiting to see if it could make it out alive. 1 step, 2 steps, 10 steps, until 100 steps. The calf was still safe and sound. It was very excited. It could even express its emotions like a human. It became bolder and sped up. In the end, it successfully made it out of the mountain pass and appeared outside the mountain range. Zhou Quan cursed. He was a little worried, but he was also eager to try. He said in a low voice, "A bull god walked out. Its whole body is golden. There must be something special about it. It's so small. Can we catch it?" Chapter 13. Chu Feng shook his head. He didn't agree. Although this calf was only 1 meter tall and could be considered a calf, it was definitely not simple. It might be dangerous to rush over rashly. Under the bright moonlight in the mountain forest, the golden calf was very excited. After successfully rushing out, it twisted its head and swung its tail. Then, it jumped up high and let out a low moo. There were many plants in the mountain forest, and many of them had flowers. The golden calf became nervous after seeing it. It restrained its excitement and approached carefully, as if it was facing a great enemy. Obviously, it felt that it was not completely out of danger yet. It moved slowly, and its golden hooves landed lightly. When it approached a cluster of mountain vine flowers, it took a shallow breath and stood still. A pair of short horns emitted a golden luster. After confirming that it was safe, it moved its hooves again and walked towards a place with more plant. Pollen catalyst. Chu Feng was deep in thought. He saw clearly that calf was swallowing pollen, as if it was testing something. It was very nervous. It made a big circle and touched many mountain flowers. In the past few days the heaven and earth had changed. The most common phenomenon was the rapid growth of all kinds of plants and flowers. Flowers and plants bloomed on a large scale, and the buds were different from usual. The golden calf made a circle, and its body actually emitted golden flames. Moo! It let out a low roar, and its body trembled in fear. This kind of sign indicated that it might follow in the footsteps of the previous beasts and be burned to death. At the mountain pass, pairs of lantern-like eyes were staring at it. The oppressive atmosphere was suffused with a bone-chilling and terrifying baleful aura. "It's also going to die?" Zhou Quan was surprised. Flames curled up. Calf was very flustered and unwilling. It kept roaring, and its shiny golden fur trembled. Waves of ripples appeared, as if it wanted to drive away the flames. This time it was different. The golden calf was not burned to death. The flames had only risen for a moment, but they were soon extinguished. It was not harmed at all. Roar. Within the mountain range, the roars of beasts resounded in all directions. Those vicious birds and ferocious beasts became restless. Chu Feng covered his ears, but he was still shaken to the point that his qi and blood were surging. Zhou Quan was even worse off. Dizzy and dizzy, he sat on the ground and almost fainted. The golden calf had passed through the gates of hell. It was no longer nervous or fearful. It stomped its hooves and mooed endlessly. Stimulated by this result, 6 or 7 creatures rushed out from the mountain range one after another. Some spread their wings, some ran, the wind whistled, and the mountain forest trembled. However, their fates were extremely miserable. They all failed, turning into spheres of fiery light one after another, breaking apart at the edge of the mountain range, only leaving behind large amounts of ashes. In the end, the mountain pass was completely silent, and no more vicious beasts walked out. Walking out alive, the golden calf shook its head and wagged its tail excitedly. What it did next left Chu Feng and Zhou Quan dumbfounded. It actually sat down on its hind legs like a human. Although it was very awkward, wobbly, and unstable, it was exactly what it meant. Then, it raised its 2 front hooves, one pointing to the sky and the other to the ground. It even made a series of sounds, moo, moo, moo. What is it doing? Has it been reading Buddhist scriptures? Zhou Quan looked as if he had seen a ghost. This thing is actually assuming the posture of a Buddha, pointing one hand to the sky and the other to the ground, as if it is the only one in the world. Fatso Zhou's eyes widened. It was just a calf, and yet it was making such a move. It was too ridiculous. Zhou Quan nudged Chu Feng and said in a low voice, "I think we should be able to catch it. This thing is still a calf after all. It will definitely be easy to deal with." As soon as he finished speaking, before Chu Feng could reply, the golden calf turned around and landed on its 4 hooves. It shook its golden fur and was already slowly walking over. "We've been discovered." Zhou Quan was shocked. "Don't act rashly." Chu Feng still felt that this kind of strange beast, even if it was still in its infancy stage, was not ordinary. The golden calf moved slowly and its nose moved. It went straight to Fatso Zhou's side, and then it suddenly bit on his backpack and pulled it with force. "Stealing my stuff?" Fatso Zhou pulled it back and quickly protected it. Then, he turned around and was about to ride on the calf's back. Unfortunately, this golden calf was very agile. With a violent shake, it threw him off. Then, it stood up straight and its 2 hind legs landed on the ground. It stretched out its 2 front hooves, and as if it was wrestling, it flipped Fatso Zhou over. Fatso Zhou was a little confused. What kind of bull was this? It even knew how to wrestle? It was so small, but it was able to push him down. "I'm going to kill you." Zhou Quan crawled up from the ground, rushed over, grabbed the golden calf, and wrestled with it. Seeing this scene, Chu Feng was a little speechless. He had already pulled out the black short sword and was ready to slash at Fatso Zhou. But now he stopped, because he saw that this calf did not have any killing intent. Its eyes were rolling like a human, and it was very intelligent. He felt that he was not facing a wild beast, but a high-level primate. He felt that it did not have much evil intentions. However, he could not let Fatso Zhou be at a disadvantage. He quickly rushed over to help, and grabbed the 2 horns of the calf, trying to press it to the ground. "This calf, it's coming for my fruit," Zhou Quan shouted. During this process, the golden calf was extremely strong. It stood on the ground with its 2 hind legs, and relied on its 2 front hooves to hug Fatso Zhou, causing him to roll and crawl. Fatty Zhou was furious. It would have been fine if he had been knocked down by a cow, but now, he had been caught by a calf and thrown around. Not only that, he had been cleanly put down. His face was covered in dirt, and his nose was almost crooked from anger. Chu Feng helped. He grabbed the horns of the calf and pulled it to the side. He could see that if this calf really went crazy and used its golden horns to poke Fatso, it would definitely be able to poke a bloody hole. It was too strong, but it did not have much hostility, so it did not do that. But at this moment, Fatso Zhou was extremely angry, because he saw that the calf was actually laughing at him. Its mouth was so big that it almost reached its ears. It was laughing at him. "Damn you, you're pressing me, and you're laughing at me. Get up." Fatso Zhou was furious. With a crunch sound, the golden calf bit open his backpack and was about to swallow the bright red, fragrant fruit. Zhou Quan was anxious. He used all his strength to push its head away. Although he did not dare to eat this fruit, he did not plan to give up. He had been thinking about it. No matter how you looked at it, the young man with the silver wings looked like a transcendent. Otherwise, why would the higher-ups of celestial biology welcome him as if he was a rising star? Chu Feng helped. He abandoned the horns, hugged its neck, and forcefully moved it away. He could not let the fruit be eaten by this calf. The golden calf was very persistent. It still opened its mouth and bit forward. Poof! The bright red fruit broke its skin and the red light sprinkled down. This place was holy, and the fruit fragrance was so strong that it could not melt. Chu Feng was shocked. The fruit was swallowed by the golden calf? However, when he looked down, he saw that Fatso was lying on the ground, coughing. Its face was red, and it kept beating its chest. At this critical moment, he was quite valiant. He directly stuffed the red fruit into his mouth and swallowed it in just 2 or 3 bites. He did not even spit out the core. He choked until his eyes rolled back. The golden calf put down its front hooves and stopped wrestling with Zhou Quan. It stood there with its 4 hooves on the ground. It seemed that it was very angry. The fruit was too tempting for it. It was so angry that smoke was coming out of its nose. Obviously, it was not an evil beast. In such a disappointed situation, it did not have the intention to kill. "I'm choking to death. Water, water, water!" Zhou Quan shouted. He kept coughing, and tears flowed down his nose. Chu Feng pulled Zhou Quan up from the ground and gave him a bottle of water. Then, he patted Zhou Quan's back. Finally, Zhou Quan felt better. "You're still too young to compete with me." He glared fiercely at the golden calf. At the same time, he said angrily, "You little calf, you actually wrestled with me and rolled on the ground. I'm so angry." "Why are you angry with a calf? The fruit tastes good, right? How do you feel now?" Chu Feng asked. He was really afraid that something would happen to him. "The fruit juice is fragrant and sweet, but I didn't have time to taste it carefully. I just swallowed it." Zhou Quan regretfully smacked his lips, wanting to savor the taste. "I feel a little cold, and there's a force rushing around." At this point, he closed his eyes to feel it. At this time, the golden calf stared at him, and finally stared at the green grass in his hand. It was a very ordinary type of weed, but after bearing the red fruit, it seemed to be different. It was full of vitality and had a strong aura of life. "You still want to compete with me?" Zhou Quan stared back. As he spoke, he plucked off a leaf, stuffed it into his mouth, and bit hard. "Hey, that's the leaf of the grass. You can't eat it. Don't compete with me," Chu Feng reminded him. "Tui tui, it's so bitter. It tastes so bad." Zhou Quan felt that he was dumbfounded by the calf. Otherwise, why would he do such a stupid thing and eat the grass for no reason? On the opposite side, the golden calf was staring at him angrily. At this time, not only was white smoke coming out of its nose, but white smoke was also coming out of its ears. It almost bumped into him. "Don't come over. I'll give it to you, okay?" Fatso Zhou felt a little guilty and handed over the green grass. Crack! The golden calf swallowed half of the grass in one bite. It almost bit his hand. Fatso Zhou was so scared that he quickly let go of the grass and backed away. "You can also eat that grass. Don't glare at me. Also, quickly put away the white smoke coming out of your nose and ears. Don't let it out. Why are you angry?" I'm the one who should be angry. The fall almost broke Grandpa Zhou's bones, Zhou Quan said. The golden calf calmed down. You can understand what we're talking about? Chu Feng tried to communicate with it. He wanted to know more about the strange changes in Taihang Mountains. This calf came from there, so maybe it knew the whole truth. The golden calf didn't nod or shake its head. Instead, it started to size him up. It doesn't understand. You have to do it like this. Zhou Quan grabbed a handful of grass and walked up to it. His smile was a little malicious as he said, "Little guy, eat it. Let's get closer. How about you become Grandpa Zhou's mount? I'll give you fresh grass to eat every day." At this moment, the golden calf raised its head and looked at him from the corner of its eyes. The look in its eyes made Fatso Zhou doubt his life, because the golden calf seemed to have some kind of disdainful expression. "Hey, did you feel that?" Zhou Quan asked Chu Feng. "Why do I feel like this calf is looking down on me? It's like I'm an idiot." "Yes." Chu Feng nodded. "I'm being looked down on by a calf?" Zhou Quan was furious. Then, he pointed at the golden calf and said, "You ate my grass, so you have to be my mount. Do you hear me?" Whoosh! The next moment, the golden calf appeared behind Zhou Quan at an incredible speed. Then, it stood up and lay on him. Its two front hooves rested on his shoulders, and finally, it hugged his neck. F***ck. Fatso Zhou was furious. The calf was like a dog's skin plaster, sticking to him. "What's going on? I asked you to be my mount. What are you doing?" He yelled in exasperation. "I think it wants to treat you as its mount." Chu Feng laughed. Fatty Zhou pondered for a moment. This calf really did seem to have this meaning. In particular, when he turned around, he saw it grinning and nodding at him. In Zhou Quan's eyes, that expression was too disgusting. "Get off me!" There was a commotion in the forest. Half an hour later, Zhou Quan was panting. He was running in front, and the golden calf was chasing behind him. From time to time, it would stand up and run on its hind hooves, pouncing on Fatso Zhou, wanting him to carry it. "Help!" Fatso Zhou completely lost his temper. After such a long time, he found that he could not deal with the calf. Not only did he not get a mount, but he also wanted to ride him. "I don't know where you came from, but I know that our mutating world is a fatal temptation for you," Chu Feng said. In an instant, the golden calf stopped. It no longer chased after Fatso Zhou, but looked at Chu Feng. Even though they know that they might die, those ferocious birds and monsters still want to rush into our world. "It's obvious how tempting it is," Chu Feng continued. He successfully attracted Cav's attention and made it quiet. Fatso Zhou was bullied badly just now. Now that he was finally free, he hid behind Chu Feng. He was sweating all over and sat on the ground. "I was bullied by a calf. How embarrassing!" He cursed in a low voice, not daring to provoke it any more. At the same time, he was also attracted by Chu Feng's words and listened attentively. "After the changes in our world, even the weeds on the side of the road can bear wondrous fruit. There are even people who can fly after eating these fruit. I believe there will be even more astonishing fruits in the future. You guys have come for this," said Chu Feng. He continued to speculate. "I think at the beginning, the upheaval might be the most intense. It's possible that in a short time, a king? That's why you came." King was Chu Feng's pronoun. He knew that the golden calf should be able to understand. The golden calf became even quieter. "Where did you come from?" Chu Feng asked softly. "The holy ground needs everyone's protection. It's Monday and the new book will be on the list. Members click, recommend, bookmark, and put it on the bookshelf." Chapter 14. The golden calf was silent. It didn't make a sound, nor did it nod or shake its head. It just stared at Chu Feng calmly, as if it was thinking about something. "I think this calf is weird. Let's not mess with it," Zhou Quan said. He was a little scared after being tortured, so he didn't want to mess with the golden calf anymore. Pollen catalyst. Suddenly, Chu Feng said these words. When they graduated, Linoy's family had sent a car to pick her up. They vaguely mentioned these words. However, he was treated coldly and stood far away, so he didn't hear it clearly. After saying these words, the golden calf's eyes shone with a profound light. It nodded at him, finally responding. It could understand Chu Feng's words. Those words had touched its nerves. Chu Feng was a little lost in thought. The so-called strange fruit might not be the most important thing, but the pollen of some strange flowers might be more important. He came to this conclusion. Even so, when Chu Feng asked about other things, it still didn't answer and didn't show any expression. I once saw a bronze mountain in the Western Highlands. It only appeared after a lightning strike, and there was a strange plant rooted on it. Its blooming flowers were fragrant beyond compare, making people feel light as if they were about to ascend to heaven and ascend to immortality. Chu Feng said these words to test it. Zhou Quan was a little dazed. He quietly listened to Chu Feng. As expected, the golden calf couldn't stay calm anymore. It was excited and moved closer. It kept nodding and making sounds, as if it was urging him to continue. Chu Feng was confused. Was the flower of that small tree really that important? He had come into contact with it before, and had only felt a faintly discernible warm current. There had been no other changes. Looking at the golden calf's excited look, its desire for the flower was far greater than when it saw Zhou Quan's red fruit. I met a giant golden bird, a mystical mastiff, and a black yak of the same race as you, Chu Feng said while observing its expression. The golden calf was as expressive as a human being. It opened its mouth with surprise and nervousness. It was very concerned about the result. In our world, yaks and mastiffs are not the top primates. They don't have full intelligence. However, the ones that appeared in the Bronze Mountain are very different. They are more intelligent than humans. Chu Feng looked at its reaction and said slowly. Then, he began to speculate. As expected, the golden calf showed a solemn expression after hearing these words. It seemed that it attached great importance to those creatures. I think that in that kind of environment in the past, they were able to develop intelligence and were invincible in the Western Highlands. Then, after this world changes, they might become even more extraordinary, or even become saints. The golden calf listened attentively, and couldn't help but nod its head. Obviously, this was a subconscious action, and it agreed with this statement. Suddenly, it came back to its senses and calmed down. It didn't want to reveal its thoughts. However, Chu Feng saw it clearly and confirmed his guess. I think, after the world changes, can we call it the primitive stage? In the primitive stage, it's easy to have saints? Chu Feng chose his words carefully. He wanted to find a word to describe the unknown level. The golden calf's pupils shrank. Obviously, it was touched. You came here one after another. This means that the so-called primitive stage is beyond imagination. You all want to find the opportunity to become saints. Chu Feng said again. Zhou Quan was shocked. Then, he felt very impressed. Chu Feng tested some details and gradually outlined all kinds of vague outlines that might appear after the changes. Now, even Zhou Quan had a grasp of the trend. He was secretly shocked and began to speculate along with Chu Feng's thoughts. When the golden calf looked at Chu Feng, it was obvious that it was close and even valued him. At least, it didn't look at him the way it looked at Zhou Quan. What do you mean? You look at me like I'm an idiot. You look at me with disdain. But when you look at me as an equal. You're pissing me off. Zhou Quan felt hurt. Especially now that the golden calf was grinning and laughing at him silently. The look in its eyes was too obvious. After midnight, the mountain was quiet. They were far away from the exit of the Taihang Mountains. They could no longer feel the horrible aura of the ferocious beasts. The moonlight was like water, sprinkling over the forest, and there was a misty clear splendor flowing about. Brother, was the small tree you saw on the bronze mountain really that magical? The flowers were taken by the three-headed monster. Didn't you get anything? Zhou Quan asked. 4 petals fell on my palm. Chu Feng answered. Did you really get something? Zhou Quan was just asking casually. In his opinion, with the fierce mastiff and the golden giant bird, Chu Feng would be lucky if he could get out of the mountain alive. At this time, the golden calf seemed to be very excited. It rushed over and touched Chu Feng's palm with its head. Its eyes were wide open, as if it was trying to see something. It's been many days. It's long gone. Chu Feng laughed. However, the golden calf still refused to leave. It circled around Chu Feng with a strange look in its eyes. In the end, it even stood on its hind legs and pointed at Chu Feng with a front hoof. It seemed to be excited and regretful at the same time. What do you know? Hurry up and tell me. Zhou Quan stared at the calf. Moo! The calf responded to him. Zhou Quan was so angry that he wanted to give it a slap, but he didn't dare to. Chu Feng and Zhou Quan walked in front. The golden calf followed behind them and didn't leave. It seemed that it was going to follow them to the end. They walked toward the county in front of them. It was called Shunping. Zhou Quan's home was there. They had been delayed for too long. Finally, they were almost there. Calf, do you have a name? I don't know what to call you if you keep following us like this. Do you want me to call you Little Calf? Zhou Quan turned around. Then, he enthusiastically gave it a name. You're so young, but you're already a bastard and a monster. I think it's better to call you Bull Demon. It sounds cool and nice. Zhou Quan tried his best to persuade it to accept the name. Bang! In the end, he was hit by the hoof and fell to the ground. He didn't get up for a long time. Damn you, Bull Demon! Zhou Quan huffed and puffed for a long time before he got up. He was so angry that he wanted to pounce on it. Finally, they entered the county. It wasn't big. It was already late at night. The streets were quiet. Occasionally, a cat would run by. The street lights were very dim. Chu Feng said goodbye to Zhou Quan. He still had to continue walking for more than 10 miles before he could get home. Zhou Quan tried his best to persuade him to stay. He wanted him to leave tomorrow morning. Chu Feng shook his head. He was worried that if one night passed, the distance of more than 10 miles would become dozens or even hundreds of miles. The world had changed drastically in the past 2 days. It was unpredictable. Brother, take care. I'll go find you after I meet my family and settle down, Zhou Quan said. He understood that in the near future, the whole world might not be the same. This friend and fellow countryman he made on the road was worth making. Seeing the golden calf leave with Chu Feng without hesitation or even looking at him, Fatso Zhou was so angry that he gritted his teeth. You heartless calf! You ate my rare grass and you don't even have anything to say before we part? Zhou Quan shouted from behind. Hearing this, the golden calf didn't turn around. Slowly, it straightened its tail and wagged its tail at him. Zhou Quan was dumbfounded. He had never seen such a thing before. It was looking down on him. Get lost, you bull demon! Zhou Quan said angrily. He wanted to help Chu Feng find a car, but he was rejected. The golden calf was too eye-catching and shouldn't be seen by too many people. At this time, Fatso Zhou was very tired. He wanted to fall asleep immediately. He felt that his body had undergone some strange changes ever since he ate the fruit. Goodbye. Although it was already late at night, it was not dark. The moon hung high in the sky, casting a silvery white light over the land. The golden calf was shining under the moonlight. On the way, Chu Feng was very curious. He tried to touch the calf's fur. It was indeed fur, not metal. It was smooth and soft like satin. Only the 2 golden horns were cold and hard. Qinyang town was a dozen miles away from the county. Chu Feng was born here. When he was 10, he followed his parents to the giant city 200 miles away, Shuntian. Shuntian was the capital of 6 dynasties. It was the largest city in the north. However, over the years, his family would always come back to Qinyang town during the holidays. He always felt closer to this place. Although it was late at night, Chu Feng couldn't help but turn on his communicator to contact his parents. The call was quickly answered. He had already contacted them during the day. He knew that they were still in Shuntian. Now, he already knew that Mount Taihang was in great danger. If a few ferocious beasts escaped, it would be a disaster. So he didn't want his parents to come back. "Dad, I'm almost home." After picking up the call, he told his parents about the situation and solemnly told them not to come back. He might go there himself. In Chu Feng's opinion, Mount Taihang was the center of the north, the largest city. If there was any danger, the city should be protected with the highest level of protection. The call lasted for a long time. Finally, he persuaded his parents to wait in the giant city. The night was quiet. Finally, he was home. It was a 2-story building, located in the easternmost part of Qinyang town. It had a large yard and was next to a large orchard. From there, one could see Mount Taihang from afar. This was also the reason why Chu Feng's family liked to come back here. It was already late at night. Chu Feng brought the golden calf into the yard and ignored it. He was really tired. He went up to the second floor, entered his room, and fell asleep immediately. Early in the morning, the golden glow sprinkled into the room. The sun had just risen, emitting the aura of life. Although he slept late, Chu Feng was the first to wake up. He first turned on his communicator to see if there was any sensational news. There were all kinds of anomalies happening everywhere, and it was worth paying attention to. Celestial King? He was shocked to see such a report on the internet. In the past 2 days, apart from the mysterious young man with silver wings, there were 3 more cases of human mutation. Moreover, it had been confirmed that all 3 of them had obtained terrifying supernatural abilities. Some busybodies called them Celestial Kings. One of the articles analyzed the situation and said that if the situation continued, some people would obtain supernatural abilities, and it was possible that a new era of mystery would begin. And the first few people to obtain supernatural abilities were very likely to be ahead of the others. It was not impossible for them to be revered as celestial kings one day. For example, the silver-winged young man who was picked up by celestial biology could already fly in the sky and burrow into the ground. His future was unimaginable. Chu Feng put down his communicator and went downstairs to the yard. He was shocked to see the golden calf bathed in the brilliant morning glow. Its posture was too strange. At this moment, it was sitting cross-legged on the ground like a human, and its 2 front hooves were naturally stretched out. It was facing the rising sun and inhaling and exhaling the morning glow. This was too strange. It was clearly a cow, but it was sitting cross-legged like a human, breathing and exhaling. Chu Feng was curious. He felt that the breathing rhythm was strange, and there was an inexplicable pattern to it. Chapter 15. This breathing technique had a strange rhythm. Sometimes it was heavy, sometimes it was weak, sometimes it was fast, and sometimes it was slow. It was a little complicated. Although Chu Feng was smart, he was still not used to it at first. He inhaled and exhaled a few times and coughed violently as if he was choking on water. The golden calf opened its eyes, and when it saw this scene, it couldn't stop grinning. "What are you laughing at?" Chu Feng glared at it. He could finally understand Zhou Quan's feelings. Being laughed at by a calf indeed made him want to beat it up. The golden calf sat there cross-legged steadily, breathing in and out. A fragrant white mist came out of its mouth and nose as it breathed in and out. As it breathed in and out, the pure white mist went in and out of its mouth and nose, mixing with the morning glow. It was collecting the essence of the sun and the moon. It could be seen that its body was overflowing with colorful lights as it breathed in and out. Its whole body seemed to be made of gold, which made it look even more extraordinary. Moo! Following a low roar, a white mist came out of its mouth and nose. It exploded in the air like a muffled thunder, deafening and shocking. The sudden sound gave Chu Feng a fright. If that white mist came in contact with a human body, it would probably be sent flying. As for whether the body would be damaged or not, it was unknown. It's that powerful? Chu Feng was amazed. This was just a breath from the golden calf, and it already had such destructive power. Can I learn this breathing technique? His eyes were burning with desire. The golden calf was proud of itself. It raised its head, as if it was full of confidence and pride. Chu Feng instinctively sensed that this calf seemed to be unimaginably arrogant about the breathing technique it had mastered. He felt that it must be something extraordinary. This breathing technique has a lot of history? Chu Feng asked. It was only a calf, and it was only a meter tall. It couldn't have figured it out by itself. The golden calf immediately became a little nervous, and a wary look appeared on its face. Chu Feng was surprised. Could it be that it was even more mysterious than he had imagined? It even had reservations about telling others? Can I learn from you? He asked hopefully. He was worried and hoped that he could protect himself in the future. Great changes were taking place everywhere, and all types of abnormal phenomena appeared. Some humans mutated and possessed supernatural abilities. As for what they would develop into, no one could say for sure. It was conceivable that apart from humans, there would most likely be other species evolving, such as the giant vine that hung in the sky and tore down the satellite. In the future, there would be danger everywhere. Other than that, there were also some famous mountains and great rivers. For example, in the depths of the Taihang Mountains, hundreds and thousands of majestic mountains inexplicably appeared, accompanied by vicious birds and monsters. And this might just be the tip of the iceberg. Therefore, Chu Feng felt a sense of urgency. He wanted to protect himself so that he could survive in this world that was constantly changing. The golden calf was magical, and it gave him hope. The golden calf seemed to be in a dilemma. It sat there without moving, as if it was thinking. You know, I've seen the strange little tree on the bronze mountain. I can take you there in the future. Chu Feng smiled and tried to tempt him. Then he added, the premise is that I can survive. Moo. The golden calf seemed to have made a decision. It let out a low roar and nodded solemnly. Chu Feng was delighted. He didn't expect things to go so smoothly. He was really afraid that the golden calf would be stubborn and ignore him. The golden calf pointed at the sun with one of its front hooves, and then it signaled Chu Feng to face the east and start that strange breathing method. Chu Feng was a fast learner, and this time was no exception. He imitated the calf's breathing rhythm. Sometimes it was heavy, and sometimes it was weak and silent. In the eyes of ordinary people, this was already very good, and the imitation was very accurate. However, Chu Feng didn't feel comfortable at all. He almost choked on his own breath several times. His chest felt like it was suffocating, and he felt dizzy. This was obviously not normal. He saw the golden calf let out comfortable snores as it breathed. Its eyes were closed, and it was almost asleep. Moreover, it emitted a fragrant scent. It was just a calf, but its body was emitting a natural fragrance because it was breathing. It was really strange. Chu Feng frowned and stopped. He realized a serious problem. This breathing method might be extraordinary, but it might not be suitable for humans. The golden calf sensed something and opened its eyes. It seemed to be asking him why he had stopped. Chu Feng said directly, I'm a bit worried if humans can adapt to this breathing rhythm. To his surprise, the golden calf nodded without hesitation, giving him a definite answer. This surprised Chu Feng. He confirmed again and then asked, There's really no problem. What kind of breathing method is this? Can other races also practice it? The golden calf had an arrogant expression. It grinned and raised its head when this breathing method was mentioned, as if it was extremely conceited. Its attitude was obvious, as if this was the world's #1 breathing method. An amazing breathing method? Chu Feng was suspicious. The golden calf sat there cross-legged with its 2 front hooves raised. One hoof pointed to the sky and the other to the ground. Kept making sounds. Moo moo moo, alright, alright, alright. I understand. You're the only one in the world, Chu Feng said hurriedly, afraid that it would moo out some Buddhist scriptures. He sat down and tried again. He matched the golden calf's breathing rhythm, but the effect was minimal. He didn't feel anything special. Chu Feng persisted and didn't give up. Although this breathing method was complicated and its rhythm was strange, he still memorized it. He felt that there was no difference, but it was still ineffective. Until suddenly, a thunderous sound rang out. The calf that was meditating let out a deafening roar, as if it contained some kind of strange power. At this moment, everything here was resonating. A faint fragrance pervaded the air. A mass of white mist enshrouded the place, and the roar was incessant. Chu Feng felt his ears ringing. Then, as if his body was resonating, he couldn't hear anything else except for the sound of breathing. It was the golden calf's breathing rhythm. It was extremely precise. What he had imitated before was only the form. Only now did he sense the spirit. He could even hear the sound of the blood flowing in the golden calf's body. It was the combination of this breathing rhythm that gave rise to extraordinary abilities. Chu Feng understood. He had first learned the form, and now he had obtained the spirit. The spirit of the breathing method was given to him by the golden calf in a very special way. It could be considered a secret art. Otherwise, the form alone would be useless. The roar, the thunder, and the white mist appeared at the same time. The spirit contained within was clearly sensed by him, and he received the inheritance. Chu Feng opened his eyes. The white mist dispersed and returned to the golden calf's body. He nodded solemnly to express his gratitude. He began to practice the breathing method at ease. Everything was different now. Unexpectedly, there were immediate results. He faced the rising sun and experienced the vigorous essence of life as he breathed. In this early morning, he felt unprecedentedly relaxed. His whole body was at ease and all his pores had opened up. There was a warm current surging through him. Gradually, Chu Feng became motionless and completely immersed himself in the process. The golden morning glow sprinkled down on his body, and a faint golden luster appeared on his face. The golden calf opened its mouth in astonishment and stared at him for a long time. When Chu Feng opened his eyes again, the sun had already risen high in the sky. He felt full of energy and refreshed. Even though he had only slept for 2 or 3 hours last night, he felt unprecedentedly good. How magical! Chu Feng exclaimed. He felt too comfortable. Every movement of his was vigorous and vigorous. His body actually had a translucent luster to it. He was full of energy and seemed to have an inexhaustible supply of energy. He wanted to continue because he felt that doing so was a form of enjoyment. However, the golden calf stopped him, indicating that he could continue. I can only practice this breathing method for a short period of time a day? Chu Feng was surprised. The golden calf nodded. This was quite unexpected to Chu Feng. Next, Chu Feng cleaned the house that he hadn't lived in for a long time. Then he went out for a big shopping spree. The supermarket was somewhat empty. He went to several places and did his best to buy some daily necessities, enough to last him for a period of time. Apparently, the various reports had caused people to panic and almost emptied out all the major stores. Fatso Zhou is right. I should give you a name. Otherwise, how should I call you? Chu Feng wanted to ask about the golden calf's original name, but it only mooed a few times. He couldn't understand it at all. Actually, Bull Demon is a good name, he suggested. However, as soon as he mentioned it, the golden calf showed a look of disdain. That was because it always felt that Fatso was an idiot and didn't want him to give it a random name. In the end, Chu Feng had no choice but to say a few random names. In the end, he accidentally said the word yellow cattle, which the golden calf liked. Chu Feng was stunned. He opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but the golden calf chose this name. Chu Feng's expression was strange. He didn't know what expression Fatso would have when he saw Zhou Quan again. He had tried his best to give the golden calf a domineering name, Bull Demon. In the end, it didn't want the name Yellow Cattle. Why don't we change it? Chu Feng discussed with it. Moo! The yellow cattle stared. It was a little dissatisfied. It was golden all over and was proud of it. Chu Feng guessed that there was something hidden. For example, it had the so-called golden bloodline, so it liked the name Yellow Cattle? At noon, Chu Feng prepared some fresh grass for the yellow cattle, as well as some pears and apples. He also ate some simple food. Then, he carefully took out a stone box. It was 3 inches tall, square, simple and ordinary. When the yellow cattle saw the stone box, there was a strange look in its eyes. It quietly moved closer. Don't move. You can't eat this, Chu Feng warned. The yellow cattle stared at the 3 seeds. One was black, one was squashed, and one was wrinkled. It suddenly showed a look of disdain. Don't look down on them. Let me tell you, these are not ordinary seeds, Chu Feng deliberately said. He knew that Yellow Ox wouldn't mind if it didn't. Otherwise, he was afraid that the calf would swallow the whole thing in one gulp. Moo! The yellow cattle shook its head and laughed. Chapter 16. Do I need to add some fertilizer? Chu Feng pondered. He cleared out a patch of parterre in the yard and hesitated before burying the seeds in it. Because he cared a lot about it, he treated it very carefully. Ordinary fertilizer could not be used. He tilted his head to look at the yellow cattle. It was still laughing at him as if he was an idiot. It was obvious that it thought the 3 wrinkled seeds could not survive. Yellow cattle, you have to help. Whether these 3 seeds can germinate depends on you. Yellow Ox was puzzled by Chu Feng's solemn expression. It bellowed as if asking why Chu Feng would say such a thing. Look, the soil in my garden is used for planting flowers and grass. It lacks fertilizer. Give me some contribution points. Chu Feng asked calmly. Yellow Cattle was confused at first. Then, it realized that the smell was coming. It opened its eyes wide and stared at him with white smoke coming out of its nose. Don't be angry. This is nothing to you. It's very natural. I will allow you to do it in this garden. Yellow Cattle's ears also started to smoke. Its eyes seemed to be able to kill people. It glared at Chu Feng angrily. At the same time, one of its front hooves started to dig the soil on the ground, ready to charge at any time. Don't be so agitated. I don't mind you. Let it stink. I'll just bear it. Chu Feng did not know what was good for him, and was still trying to persuade it. Bang! Yellow Cattle rushed over and directly knocked him away. Fortunately, it did not use its 2 golden horns. Even so, Chu Feng still fell into the garden. He grimaced from the fall. He could finally understand how Zhou Quan felt. It was too dangerous to negotiate with a cow. In fact, Yellow Cattle was even angrier than him. It stared at him with its eyes. It suspected that this guy was even more unreliable than Fatso. He needed to be taught a lesson. Chu Feng rubbed his arm as he got up. He sighed and said, You don't know. This is a holy seed. I'm afraid ordinary fertilizer won't be able to keep it alive. Don't you have a mysterious background? Didn't they say that cow dung has a strong effect? Besides, there's also the saying that you're lucky. Moo! Yellow Cattle let out a low roar. Although it wasn't big, its voice echoed in the yard like thunder. It was so loud that Chu Feng quickly covered his ears. Fine, fine, don't come over. If you don't want to give it to me, then forget it, Chu Feng said, because he saw that the yellow cattle's 4 hooves were stomping on the ground, as if it was desperate to rush into the flower bed. Chu Feng placed the slightly plump seed in the soil, buried it, and began to water it. It all depends on your luck, he muttered to himself. The 3 seeds had been sealed in the stone box for countless years. He really didn't know if they could germinate. However, if it wasn't an ordinary creature, its vitality should be very tenacious. Even if the current environment wasn't too suitable, it should still be able to survive in the end. It's better not to use cow dung, Chu Feng said to himself, because he thought of a very serious problem. After hearing this, Yellow Cattle's expression was not good. At the same time, it was somewhat puzzled as it stared at him. Chu Feng explained, "If I really grow a Queen Mother of West or the 9 Heavens mysterious fairy, when they find out that I use cow dung as fertilizer, they will beat me to death." Yellow Cattle was stunned and then became angry. It let out a moo and wanted to rush over again. "Don't come over, I'm telling the truth. If they really know, they will probably think that it's the most serious blasphemy. I'd better be too flat, honest, and save everything." Chu Feng laughed. Yellow Cattle's nose puffed out white smoke. It glared at Chu Feng fiercely, and then turned its head to eat the pineapple. "I gave you fresh grass and apples, the pineapple is mine." Chu Feng chased after it. In the end, he buried the 3 seeds in 3 different places. Because the soil for planting flowers was also divided into several types, he felt that it was safer to scatter the seed. "I really hope they can sprout soon." Chu Feng was very hopeful. He wanted to see what would grow. "However, if they really grow a mysterious fairy, I have nothing to worry about. I'm the one who created them, so there's no need to talk about blasphemy. Perhaps they will be very obedient." There was a smile on his face. "Moo!" The sound of a cow's moo interrupted his thoughts. Yellow Cattle grinned and squinted, as if mocking him for daydreaming. It had a look of disdain on its face. "Go away." Chu Feng pushed away the cow's head that had come over. He was somewhat speechless after being mocked by a cow all the time. Chi! All of a sudden, he heard an explosive sound. There was an extremely dazzling fiery light in the distance, rushing into the sky. His mind was immediately shaken. Missile! Was it going to attack those plants from outer space? Chu Feng was shocked. Yellow Cattle's intuition was sharp. It immediately opened its eyes and sensed it before Chu Feng. At the same time, its whole body tensed up, and its golden fur emitted a ripple-like light. It was somewhat nervous, as if it had sensed the threat. Chu Feng understood that it was rare for him to coincidentally witness the launch of a missile because it was impossible for people to see it on normal days. "I actually saw it launched from a place not too far away. This means that the situation is very serious." His expression was solemn. He had heard many rumors in the past 2 days. It was said that such a terrible weapon of destruction had long been used in outer space. It was just that there had been no reports. He decided to check on the internet. There should be some news. At the same time, his communicator rang. It was Zhou Quan contacting him. After connecting, he immediately heard Fatso's excited voice. "Brother, did you see it just now? It's too spectacular. A sharp sword soared into the sky and shot straight into outer space. I can't believe I saw it with my own eyes. It will most likely be able to clean up those strange plants." "I hope it works," Chu Feng replied, but he also reminded Zhou Quan that he should make some early preparations to avoid the worst and terrible situation. Then, he asked Zhou Quan how he felt after eating the fruit. "It's changed a lot. Let's not talk about it anymore. I'm very sleepy and I'm going to fall into a deep sleep soon." Zhou Quan laughed awkwardly. "Don't tell me you grew a tail?" Chu Feng was suspicious. Otherwise, why would this guy be so evasive? "How is that possible?" Fatso Zhou screamed and tried to explain. He had not become an ugly monster. "Then what's wrong with you? Why are you stuttering?" Chu Feng asked. "I grew a horn." Zhou Quan wanted to cry but had no tears. He then cursed loudly. "It must be that bull demon's doing. I think it looks like a bull's horn." He cursed loudly. Yellow Cattle was very curious about Chu Feng's communicator. It stared at it again and again. At the same time, it also heard Fatso Zhou's curses. It immediately came over and ridiculed the communicator. Moo, moo, moo. Bull demon. Are you saying I'm like a bull? That I'll moo sooner or later like you? Zhou Quan was flustered and exasperated. Puh. Chu Feng cut off the call. Yellow Ox, on the other hand, was still looking forward to the end of the conversation. It was quite amusing to infuriate Fatty Zhou. Chu Feng began to search for all kinds of reports. There were no official reports. The government had expressed silence about the use of those weapons. However, there were too many rumors. Some people even uploaded some pictures that were similar to what Chu Feng had seen. It was the same all over the world. People believed that a large-scale explosion of firearms had already begun. Some people even saw plant debris falling from the sky. Something big is going to happen. Chu Feng muttered to himself. He frowned. If it was effective, it would have been announced a long time ago. However, the relevant parties were still keeping silent, which meant that the situation was very serious. Then, he looked at other reports. Sure enough, people were very enthusiastic about the discussion of supernatural abilities. Even in the current tense environment, many people were still paying attention to and analyzing the situation. Silver Wing, King Kong, Fire Spirit, and White Tiger. These 4 people were being talked about as if they were God. People were saying that they had the ability to transcend the mortal world and become saint. Maybe one day they could be respected as God. Chu Feng turned off these reports. He was a little worried. He did not know what the future would bring. He needed to make some preparations. Yellow Cattle was not happy that he had turned off those reports. It signaled him to turn it on again. Those reports with sound and pictures were very attractive to it. Chu Feng threw the communicator to it and walked out of the house alone. After walking along the street for a while, he came to a large yard. This was Zhao San's home. At the same time, it was also a cold weapon workshop. Nowadays, this kind of ancient craft was almost extinct, but it had been passed down from generation to generation in Zhao San's family. The Zhao family also kept up with the times. They used the alloy materials of this era to create knives and other things that were famous far and wide. They were loved by people in this field. The folding crossbow that Chu Feng brought to Tibet was a gift from Zhao San. Little Chu, when did you come back? Zhao San saw him and smiled. He was in his 60s, but his body was still very strong. His hair was white, but each strand was thick. His short hair stood on end. At first glance, it was obvious that this tall old man was a very tough person. I came back in the middle of the night. I had a good sleep. When I woke up, I came to see Third Master. Chu Feng smiled. You really know how to talk. What do you want from me again? Zhao San asked with a smile. Third Master, I want you to help me polish some crossbows. Chu Feng explained his purpose. Now that there were changes everywhere, he was very uneasy and wanted to be prepared. He didn't expect to buy guns. They were controlled and couldn't be bought. But in this era, some cold weapons could be sold with a license. After a simple exchange, Chu Feng told him what he wanted and then said goodbye. He heard from Zhao San that many people came to buy all kinds of alloy knives. The supply could not meet the demand, but the ones he wanted would definitely be made first. When he returned home, Chu Feng was a little suspicious. He heard Yellow Cattle mooing nonstop from a distance. Soon, he found the problem. This guy was playing with the communicator. He looked very happy and very engrossed. Wait a minute, what did he see? When Chu Feng came closer, he was shocked. Yellow Cattle opened the communicator and seemed to be talking to some people. Chu Feng suddenly felt dizzy. Black lines appeared on his forehead. Especially when he saw the names, he wanted to vomit blood. Linoy and the others were in the communicator list. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.